start streaming, and we will get this going, and get this going over here. And looks like we are streaming. Hopefully it will be a good stream.
30 seconds until showtime.
We're having some technical difficulties with the internet. I'm having to use my hotspot, and haven't used the hotspot yet. So I don't know if this is gonna work or not, but we'll see. We will see. So we will start in just a couple seconds.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, I didn't start the show with a proper... All right, well, here we go. Let's... Hold on. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Using gerrymandering, voter suppression, and other nefarious tactics, the Republican Party has manipulated our electoral system to maintain as much control as possible despite being a party in the minority. Liberal Dan Radio seeks to change that, and I need your help in doing so. Liberal Dan Radio has partnered with Levelfield to help us use tools that are typically only available to big money donors. When you go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution, it will encourage other voters to reach out to their legislators to pass legislation to stop gerrymandering and voter suppression, and target elected officials who refuse to protect the vote. Every eligible voter should be able to cast a ballot, and that ballot should have the same power as everyone else. I can't do this alone. I need your help. So please go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution today. That's stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. Political advertising paid for by Levelfield. Contributions are not tax deductible as charitable contributions.
That is area code 914-803-4131. You can also join us in both the blogtalkradio.com chat and the YouTube chat. Go to blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan. Sign in with your free blogtalkradio.com account. Go to the episode page, the one currently airing, and the chat thread should be visible or should be available in a couple seconds. Hadn't launched it yet. And then if you're watching on YouTube, youtube.com/liberaldanradio, you can also join the YouTube chat as well. Leave your comments, questions, points, etc. Shout out to Aaron West, who is the first hello in the chat room. Thank you very much. I appreciate you for coming back and joining the show. I also appreciate your giving me a shout out in one of Hal's live streams. That was very much appreciated. I've made a recent video. I'm going to go into that a little bit later about that video as well. If you're listening after the live broadcast, though, you can join us. Leave your comments, questions, concerns, etc. over on the show thread at liberaldan.com, facebook.com/liberaldan, at liberaldanradio on Twitter. Also, if you want to find me other places online, you can also go to TikTok, liberaldan radio there, or you can also... patreon.com/liberaldan to support the show. If you can't afford to support the show, which is understandable, and you know the way things in today's economy, you know, things happen. What is it? Where is it? I had to scroll down, so I lost my train of thought.
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. So things happen. You know, I can understand that everybody can't contribute monetarily, but if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, that's one of the best ways you can help the channel grow. Also make sure to smash that like button as well if you're also watching this either live or on replay. Hey, Kinky Streets, thank you for joining as well. I wasn't even sure I was going to have a podcast today simply because of the fact that my home internet has been on and off all evening, and it's been a real pain in the neck. I basically just opted into hopefully the streaming from my work cell phone hotspot won't be terrible. That's what I'm hoping, that it's not going to be terrible, that I'll be able to do a podcast with this network, and not have too many interruptions. YouTube seems to be giving me some bit rate warnings, but I don't know. I'll let you all in the chat let me know if I'm coming in too pixelated, or if I'm coming in, if the audio's coming in buffering or whatever. Just let me know. Let me know how it is. I could potentially try and rehook back up to my local internet as well, but I'd rather keep one connection for this stream. So anyway, I did want to go ahead and start off the show. I'll go ahead and do this week's Hypocrite of the Week because it's related to what I talked about as well. So here we go.
This week's Hypocrites of the Week are the folks at TikTok who claim to want to make TikTok a safer place and eliminate harassment, but apparently they do not view fat shaming as harassment, bullying, or otherwise violent behavior, despite it clearly being so. Check out my recent video on YouTube to see why. To see who next week's Hypocrite of the Week will be, tune in to Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right. Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central on blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan.
And even that sounded a little muffed, a little muffed up to me, so I don't know if that was heard very well from the YouTube folks. Yeah, it's basically the Hypocrite of the Week are the folks over TikTok, because I've been doing a lot more during the pandemic. I did download TikTok, and I know there's concerns about it being, malware or whatever, but I was, trying to weigh the threats of what it might be versus the me trying to grow the brand or whatever. So I'm like, well, if I can try and get some views, some followers, maybe it'll be a good way to launch more listenership, get more people to follow me there, get more people to follow me here. But anyway, on TikTok specifically, I have been dealing with, and something I dealt with for a while, with the fat shamers. They'll come out and they'll come out and instead of disagreeing with you and trying to have a discussion about the issues, they'll just say, "Oh, you're fat," or "Why don't you eat another donut?" Pretty pathetic. And fortunately, in my case, I'm not somebody who necessarily gets down on myself for my weight all that time. I mean, there's some frustrations, sure, but I go into it a lot more. There's a 3-hour podcast that I've done. Hey, Bill P, thank you for joining. There's a 3-hour podcast that I did when it comes to living life as an obese person in America. So if you're interested in hearing my thoughts about that, and hearing my thoughts about, what I've gone through, what I've been through, and potentially what other people go through as well, I just recommend listening to that. Just put it on in the background, just listen while you're doing other things, and you'll get to hear my thoughts, hear some other people chime in as well with, in the chat, and I repeat what they say and kind of reiterate what they say. They kind of reiterate what I say based on their life experiences or what have you. But ultimately, fat shaming, body shaming is not something that I support, not something I get into, and it's important to take into consideration, just because of the fact that one of the things that I'll bring up, I bring it up in the YouTube video, in the 3-hour podcast that I did. I've brought it up on TikTok as well. But one of the things that people really don't know or really don't understand when it comes to fat shaming is a lot of people who there's a large correlation, I should say, between people who are obese and people who've suffered at the hands of childhood abuse, be it physical and or sexual abuse. And a lot of the times people will, because that happens when they're young, they don't have the access to alcohol, they don't have the access to drugs that some other adults might have if they're trying to medicate themselves and deal with, their depression. So what do they have? They have sweets, they have sugary drinks, they have cookies and other food that is bad for you but tastes so good and makes you feel a lot better about the things. And so they'll shovel food in their mouth and use it as a coping mechanism. And so that's why and that just feeds unhealthy behaviors, which then go on into adulthood, and then those behaviors are hard to break. I'm not saying that everybody who is obese is so because of abuse. I'm not saying that everybody who's abused is obese. But there's a large correlation. There's more people, there's a strong correlation there between abuse suffered. And specifically, one of the things I go into is that there's studies that show that if a young women who were abused, especially sexual abuse, they may decide to start eating more just because they feel it might make them look less attractive, and that's something that they'll do. And of course, that's not a healthy thing to do at all. So when these people start fat shaming, thank you, Bill P. We have the Weight Challenge Brotherhood stick together. I discussed that on House Box Show yesterday. Thank you, Bill. So when these people choose to fat shame instead of discussing the topics at hand, they could very well be being mean to somebody who is overweight, not because of just simple poor life choices or because of other issues that are potentially preventable, but it's because of the fact that they've had to deal with abuse, and you're basically insulting people who've dealt with abuse, and you're making it even worse. And as I've said on my video, on the YouTube video that I posted about this, it's also a form of violence, because if you know that mocking and ridiculing and otherwise shaming somebody for being obese is something that's going to cause them harm, either by them being more likely to commit suicide or them being more likely to just continue self-medicating, making themselves larger, you're causing harm to somebody with your actions. That's violence. So unfortunately, yes, Aaron, you can be in the siblinghood of largesse. I guess that's what I put it. The siblinghood of largesse. So and I will, I'm the type of person who does make self-deprecating fat jokes, and honestly, there's not, and it's fair. And if you're somebody who doesn't like so-called fat jokes when they're actually funny, I get it, but I can hear somebody, and it doesn't have to be a fellow fat person or whatever. I can hear somebody who's overweight make a fat joke, and if it's funny, and if they're doing it to be funny, and it really is funny, I'll laugh. I'm not the type of person that's going to say you can't, that nothing is off bounds. But unfortunately, there's people who do what they call punching down, and they're not doing it to be funny. They're doing it to be mean, or they're doing it at the expense of other people. And see, Bill P, I had an organ transplant. I gained over 100 pounds. Steroids and anti-rejection meds add to the weight gain. Yeah, absolutely. And part of my weight gain early on was after Katrina. The only thing, that we had readily available to us to eat all the time are MRE, and MRE are very packed in calories, and they don't really warn you about that. So I'm just sitting there eating away at the MREs and just bloating up. A lot of times also in our health industry, in the healthcare industry, my current doctor, and I'm very sad because at the end of this month, my current general practitioner is going away to France. So he's lucky that he's getting to move to France and away from Gilead. But he's also, fortunate to just get to go to France in general. But he was one of the good ones. He is one of the doctors who will look at you and you'll say, he'll look at your conditions and look at your overall, let's say you have, I don't have high blood pressure, but let's say you had high blood pressure. Or let's say you had, a high A1C. Mine was just slightly elevated above what you would want to see. If you had all of those things, a lot of doctors would say, well, let's make you less obese and then look, and that'll treat your conditions. But my doctor, soon to be ex-doctor, is basically the type of doctor that says, let's treat your conditions because those conditions are probably contributing to the fact that you are obese. And so if you treat your conditions, you're less likely to be overweight. And then there's issues like my knee has been killing me since mid-February, and it's getting better. I followed my doctor's advice. I've been doing the stretches he told me to do to help strengthen my leg and strengthen the muscles in my leg so that it's less pressure on my knee, and it's working. It's great. It still hurts a little bit, but it's much better than what it was before. I don't need a cane right now. But when you have when you're overweight and they say go exercise, well, the obesity puts pressure on the knee. The knees hurt. You're less likely to exercise. You're less likely to exercise. You're not burning as many calories. Lather, rinse, repeat. So it's just sometimes a self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating cycle, which is rather unfortunate. I hope the doctor that I do end up getting will be at least somewhat close to as good as my current doctor is. Let's see, Bill P. Something I have until now haven't discussed publicly. I'm also one of the 93,000 victims of scouting. I'm very sorry to hear that. I was in scouting. There were maybe a couple of scoutmasters that I thought were as the kids would say today, sus. Fortunately, fortunately, I was not part of that number, but it was one of the reasons why I was slightly hesitant to send, hey, Jolie, thank you for joining. It was one of the reasons I was kind of hesitant to send my older kid to Boy Scouts. They were forming a scout troop in the school. One of the other reasons was just that when I was in Boy Scouts, it was at a synagogue, and we weren't strictly Jewish, but most of us were Jewish. So there wasn't really a level of uncomfortableness when it came to religion and when it came to everything. But I was also, going to Hebrew day school at the time. I was more practicing at the time, so it didn't bother me but we didn't really do much in the form of religious stuff that I really recall. It wasn't a Boy Scout troop for the purpose of evangelizing Jewishness, although Judaism doesn't evangelize. But to me, the feeling that I get from some of the scoutmasters that I've seen down here is that it's Boy Scouting to, promote, belief in God, and I really don't want to have my kids being proselytized to in scouting when they're trying to learn, on my honor to do my best, to do my duty to God and country, be a scout law to keep myself centered at all times. I forget what the last one. Morally straight is one. There you go. Oh, Daily News has joined the chat. Welcome, Daily News, my favorite conservative listener. Although you might get some more, you might have some competition now when some of the other people from House Channel come over. Number 7 in up thumbs. You're usually number 1 in the up thumbs, Daily News. You're slacking. Bill P. Our scout troop was Protestant sponsored. I can only imagine. I guess I can't, but I can only imagine what that must have been like. I don't know. My only experience has been in a troop that was at a synagogue, but wasn't necessarily one that was really all that faith-based, I would say. We would go camping on the Sabbath, so, we weren't that observant. Some people, I guess, were observant and wouldn't do certain things when we would go do certain camping trips, or they would try and make camping trips on, like, a Saturday night or something, or to make it so that they didn't have to travel, on a Friday night or Sunday morning or whatever, or Saturday night, whatever. Anyway, this is getting way off bounds, but, that's what happens on the show. You end up talking about one thing, and it talks about lots of other things as well. I do want to give shouts out also to Demonox, the first Liberal Dan Radio patron, to Angie, your boy Chris, and to Cesar, all of the people that are supporting Liberal Dan Radio on the Patreon. I appreciate y'all very much. I was going to show off the shirt that is going to be. I may change the Patreon level somewhat, but if you're at least at the $5 level per month, and if you subscribe for at least 12 months, you're gonna get one of these OG shirts. They're gonna be Liberal Dan OGs. Now, I'm not sure. It has Liberal Dan Radio up front, the logo, but it's all gold. It's on a black shirt. It's gonna say OG on the sleeve right there. Mine says host. And I'm weighing whether or not I'm gonna have the back say, if all of the backs say Master Debater, or if I'm gonna have all of the shirts say Cunning Linguist. Maybe I'll have some. Maybe depend on your level, you'll become Master Debater or Cunning Linguist. But I'm not sure which one I've settled on. The one I have, my shirt I have as Master Debater. Although I think I would have rathered Cunning Linguist. I don't know. That's more my cup of tea. Anyway. So excuse me. I'm just trying to keep myself hydrated with some agua, some water. Anyway, so that's something I'm thinking about, and at some point I'm going to cut that offer off, where in order to get the shirt you'll have to do it some other way. But at that, I think at that point the shirts aren't going to be the OG shirts. The shirts are going to be probably white with the regular purple, black, and red colors, with still the wording on the back potentially. But we'll see. We'll see how long I want to keep that deal up. It's not really announced on the Patreon. It's just something that you'll get if when I decide to do it, and when I decide to stop doing it, I'll also announce that too. But anyway, I do want to support the people who are supporting me, and give a little extra lanyap on top of the shouts out to the people that are supporting the show. Also, want to give a shout out to my calls me Smart Ashes. Nice. Shout out to my little brother, the host of the most Nimbus Yosh with the smooth sounds of the Percy podcast. Supposedly he was going to be making a new podcast soon, but I don't know when that's happening. It's supposed to happen at some point, but I don't know. Hopefully it'll be soon, and hopefully we'll get him and Brian on this show as well, so we can do a full-on version of forming Voltron. Sometimes if you've seen my show, you'll see I wear a Voltron themed shirt, and that was made by Demonox for the members of our Voltron chat that get along, or that talk about a whole bunch of stuff. And we've done a show all together once before, and hoping to be able to do it again. But one of the things I do want to talk about, well, before we get to the problem with labels, I do want to circle back to the abortion issue again, because there's been some debate, I guess, over what we're all basically acting as if it's a set deal, and it probably is, and that Roe's going away. I don't know if we can apply enough pressure to force them to not. We can apply enough pressure to force them to not go through with it, and to change the ruling, and to make it so that the ruling doesn't repeal Roe altogether or something. I don't know. Roberts could potentially step in there maybe and say, look, I'm not going to join you, but if you want to make a stronger ruling, maybe we'll uphold Mississippi without overturning Roe. Which it could happen, but I'm not holding my breath. A lot of people seem to think that Obergefell v. Hodges is the next up, that is the next to be challenged. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree that Obergefell is next. I think it would be much harder to do Obergefell. And not that I don't think this activist conservative Supreme Court would not want to overturn Obergefell. I think they would gleefully do so, clearly, because they are activist conservatives and who don't believe in stare decisis, despite many of them saying they do. But what I do think is that it would be much harder. Like, one of the arguments that Alito made in this horribly written ruling was that something is being a tradition. And I don't know how something can be 50 years of something in this country and not be considered a tradition, like abortion rights have been. But you have the situation where, people aren't, like, continuously in a state of aborting. And as such, when you ban it, you're definitely marginalizing and oppressing women and other folks who will have abortions, non-binary people, trans men, etc., people who have to have that choice allowed for them. But it's to me, like, I don't think the next step could be gay marriage, because people are already married. You already have people in every state who are married. It's going to be very hard for states to convince to make a convincing argument to say why they should no longer support these marriages that they are already forced to currently accept and treat as valid. So they'll do it. I'm sure they would love to do it. I just think they'll find it to be a harder path to get there to doing it. However, things like Griswold v. Connecticut, where they could nix birth control pills, or at least some state could ban birth control pills and then have it be challenged, or limit birth control pills severely and have that rule be challenged, and then have that go before Supreme Court. And since the Supreme Court said that Roe was not founded on good logic, and Roe was based in part on Griswold, as such, Griswold wouldn't be founded on good logic according to Alito and the rest of those clowns. And as such, you put the ability for people to get birth control pills out of reach. You make it harder for them to do that. And then what happens? Then you end up having more unwanted pregnancies, and then you have more people who need abortions. So then you criminalize a bunch of people who get abortions if they do go ahead and get it, because one of the things that one of the states was talking about was not just banning abortions, but banning people, criminalizing crossing state lines to get an abortion. So if you conceive, like I think it's Missouri, if you conceive in Missouri and and Missouri bans abortion, and you go from Missouri to California to go get an abortion, and then you come back, Missouri will be like, nope, you're getting arrested now. Sorry. But not sorry, actually. They're not sorry about it at all. But that's part of the things, is that they're going to continue to chip away at the rights of individuals who are oppressed in this country, and women are getting to the point where they're getting back to being more oppressed. What is next? Are they going to try and take away the right to vote? Well, that's what they're trying to do. They can't take away the right to vote by the Constitution when it comes to gender, so they can take away the right to vote by making people into felons when they normally wouldn't be. So if you go and you cross state lines to get an abortion, and if that's a felony, then guess what? You lose your right to vote in Missouri because you're a felon, and therefore you no longer get to take part in the process. And the older and whiter and more male the electorate is, the more likely you're going to see Republicans get elected. And that's the only way that Republicans can stay in power as a minority party, is by making sure that they keep the electorate as old and as white and as male as they can. Daily News. Biden administration is starving us Americans anyways. I have a Words of Redneck Wisdom that kind of touches on that conspiracy theory. We'll get to that. Loving versus Virginia is also on their racist table. Alito was talking about 15th and 16th. Yeah, if you happen to see my one from last, I think it was the show from last Monday. I did a emergency type of show where I went live on YouTube only, and I talked about that. I was going over the whole 13th century laws, all that good stuff. And then my what was it? Then I called into Hal's show, or Hal was subbing in for somebody else in somebody else's show, and I called into Hal's show and was basically talking about how, they talked about a 17th century law as well, or a discussion that took place in the 17th century in British Parliament. And I'm like, bringing out my conservative type of, we fought a war to be able to tell them British people to kiss our butts, and how we shouldn't be talking about the what they talked about in Parliament. That's not relevant to what we're doing today in this country. So, let's see. Daily News. You have I'm with stupid shirts? What are you talking about? I don't know what that is. Bill P. I live in Virginia. Jerry Falwell's moral majority has been going after interracial marriage since the 80s. So, yeah, I mean, they also think that Loving versus Virginia. One of the bizarre things, I'm no longer Facebook friends with this guy, but this guy would call into, he would also be somebody who calls into a lot of local talk radio stations, and he was against gay marriage. He was obviously clearly against Obergefell v. Hodges, but a lot of the arguments that were used to justify a ban on gay marriage, it was also used to justify bans against interracial marriage. And guess what? He was white and he was married to a black woman. And I'm like, what the hell is your problem? You realize that the same logic that you're using right now was used against you. Like, you would not be able to be married to your wife right now if those arguments were valid arguments to be made. Hide in the Shadows is making some terrible jokes in the chat. I'm not going to repeat them. So let's see. Is that a joke? Because it's pretty rude. Daily News depends on what side of the arrow is. Now, I always thought it'd be funny for a couple to get I'm with stupid shirts, but like have the arrows like so. Here's one person, here's the other person, but have the arrows pointing this way, so both of them would clearly be stupid. That would be a funny thing for a couple to do. But let's see. Yeah, let's not mock persons with disabilities, please. I don't. Just like we shouldn't be fat shaming, we shouldn't be shaming folks or making jokes. And again, as I said, making jokes that are funny, fine. Making jokes at the expense of people for who they are, how they're born, or their current life conditions, not good. Daily News, just don't mock safe spaces either. I mean, it's safe spaces are legitimate things because, you know, what happens, the reason safe spaces are created is because people act in a way that makes people unsafe. So that's why, so people who are in marginalized communities feel like the only way that they can be safe is to be in places where people respect them for who they are and not have people attack them for who they are. That's why safe spaces are important to have, and not, you shouldn't be mocking them. You should understand them. Of course, I'm sure you probably mock CRT as well, and I dealt with that on one of my recent TikTok videos. Anyway, so screw the breaks. We're not gonna take breaks today. I think we got enough people in the chat. I know the folks that are here from House Sparks' show, this fellow sparklers. And if you have ideas about what we could call fans of Liberal Dan, other than just going with the cutting linguists and master debaters, it could just be master debaters is what you go with. But if you have ideas, let me know in the chat. Send me an email. Just let me know what you think about what, you know, fans of Liberal Dan. I don't have as, you know, a good last name. Zimmerman doesn't really flow into something like House Sparks versus Sparklers. So, Daily News, how would they know that you left the state to get an abortion? I don't know how they would know. But then again, how does, like, there are people who are guys who complain about folks getting abortions, and they're like, well, they shouldn't be able to abort my child. I'm like, well, how do you know it's your child? How do you know? Maybe she cheated on you. I said on Facebook, I think I said it on Twitter. I know I said it on Facebook. I said, look, if a state passes a law that says that the person who is the sperm donor gets to decide whether or not you can get an abortion, or they have a say in controlling whether or not you have an abortion, I will volunteer and say, hey, I also had sex with this person. Therefore, you can't know who it is that who is the semen provider, who is the sperm donor, and as such, nobody would be able to interfere with the ability of the individual to get an abortion, because you couldn't prove not beyond reasonable doubt, but you couldn't even prove with a preponderance of evidence which one it was if there's a choice between two people. It's as simple as that. And I think everybody who is somebody who could help spring forth life in such a way, try not to be too graphic about the whole thing. But if you are if you could potentially have been a sperm donor, even if you didn't have sexual relations with the person, volunteer yourself. Say, hey, I will also testify that, you know, I also had sexual relations with you, just to make sure that some crazy right-winged whack job can't prevent you from utilizing your bodily autonomy rights. But here's another thing, though, another interesting thing that I wound up having it happens a lot in these discussions. Well, you'll have, these people that I'm about to talk about are more likely the red pill, men going their own way, men's rights activist type folks. So not the people who are worried about the babies and Jesus said to not abort. Not the people who are holy rollers who are insanely concerned with the life of the embryos that are in the people. Those are not these people per se. But there are other people who will make the argument. Well, they'll start making the argument by saying, well, if I'm the father, I should be able to have to determine whether or not an abortion takes place. So I should be able to stop any abortion from taking place if I'm the father. And normally you would say, well, this is just about control. They just want to control the people who are pregnant. But it's not really that. What happens is, and I've had this happen so many times, it's disgusting how I can predict it. I can kind of force the argument to go there because I know, because they don't say the silent part unless you force it out of them. And the silent part of those type of people, those red pill, men going their own way, men's rights activist types, will go from, I should be able to stop an abortion if somebody wants to get an abortion and it's my kid, ignoring the fact that you can't know for certain. But they will go from there, and they will find the convoluted way. Once you prove to them, once you make a good enough argument in their mind that okay, fine, you don't get to have a say for whatever reason, the next comment out their mouths is, well, then I shouldn't have to pay child support if I don't want the kid. So it goes from they shouldn't be able to abort my kid to I shouldn't be able to pay for a kid that I don't want. If they can get rid of the kid that they don't want, I shouldn't be able to support the kid that I want. And that's what it goes for. It goes from, because that's ultimately what their final goal is of these types of anti-choicers, of forced birthers. They're not really forced birthers. They just want to get out of paying child support. But it's not fair. You have one set of rules for the women and others for the man, what they'll say, because they can't understand that non-binary folks and trans men can also get pregnant, which is why I try to be as gender neutral as possible when I'm discussing this issue. But here's the thing. People who can gestate take on more risk when it comes to pregnancy than those who provide the sperm. If you have to gestate, you have to deal with the potential threat of anything health-wise happening to you over the next 9 months that is detrimental to your health. And you can't know if something's going to happen. You might know that you're higher risk. Maybe you have a higher risk of preeclampsia. Maybe that runs in your family. Maybe you don't want to take that risk. Maybe you don't want to get to the point where you get preeclampsia, and instead you want to just prevent it altogether. I mean, personally, it's not in my business why a person gets an abortion, but it's just one reason. But maybe they don't want to take on the medical costs that come with child gestation and childbirth. Maybe they don't want to have to deal with all that. Maybe they have other things. Maybe they don't want to take a break from their job, or maybe they think it'll hurt their career. Whatever reason, to me it's valid. But it's more risk that the person who's gestating has to take. And one thing I don't think that gets talked about enough is not just the health risk, but that financial risk. The fact that, you do hear, when somebody decides to give birth, they can then sue for child support from the sperm donor. If the sperm donor doesn't want to be involved in the kid's life, then they could typically get it if you could prove paternity. But, big but, I never hear of anybody getting funds, and maybe I'm wrong, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I never hear of anybody getting funds from the sperm donor to cover the healthcare costs, to cover the costs of, that come along. Not just the healthcare costs, loss of hours if you can't go to work because you're feeling bad because of the pregnancy, how the pregnancy is affecting you. But, any costs that you have to do, if it's not covered as part of your insurance costs, maybe you have to pay a copay, maybe you have to pay a deductible, maybe you have co-insurance, I don't know. But all those costs that are involved with pregnancy, with delivering a child, I never hear anything about the guy having or the individual who donated the sperm having to pay up their share of that money too. So it's another example of a financial risk that an individual who is carrying a fetus might have to deal with, and they shouldn't be forced to deal with it. So, but these guys will who are trying to make these arguments will make you go all the way around on this argument, and then at the end of the day say, well, I should if they can, well, they'll word it in a gendered way. They'll word it like, well, if she can abort the pregnancy, then I should be able to get out of paying child support, because that's their ultimate goal. They want to be able to get out of paying child support, and they want to use a person's right to choose an abortion to do that, even though, again, the two are dissimilar when it comes to the risks. So let's see. Daily News. Justice Thomas is black and has a white wife. Maybe that's why Loving versus Virginia wouldn't get over. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, by that logic, and that's probably the most logical thing you've said. This is not to insult you, Daily News. This is not to insult you, but this is probably the best point you've ever made on the podcast. I'm not saying you haven't made good ones in the past. I'm just saying that's probably the best point you've made on the podcast, is that the reason Loving versus Virginia may not get overturned is because if Loving versus Virginia gets overturned, then guess what? Justice Thomas could have to get a divorce from his wife, unless he's looking for an easy way to get out of it. Unless he's going, if I divorce her, I have to give her half. But if the state says my marriage is not legal to begin with, then I don't have to give her nothing, because the marriage will be dissolved and the state won't recognize my marriage to begin with. So if Clarence Thomas truly really does love his wife and wants to stay with his wife till death do they part, then yeah, sure, Justice Thomas won't vote to overturn and might join the 3 liberal justices and Roberts to uphold Loving versus Virginia. But if in this odd chance that Justice Thomas is tired of his wife and doesn't want to give her half, you'll see him going, well, Loving versus Virginia wasn't well founded, so I'm gonna go with the conservatives again. I'm gonna go with Alito, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Barrett, and we're gonna overturn Loving versus Virginia. I guess my marriage is no longer valid, so you no longer get half. Sorry, dear. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Sorry. Hiding Shadows. Can we sue the condom manufacturer that made the condom that broke Fred Trump used over 75 years ago? Do we know that Fred Trump is using a condom? I mean, Fred Trump's so old, he might have been using the sheep intestines and not latex, not Trojans, or whatever brand of condoms are available. Then he might have just, killed a lamb, pulled out the intestines, and made his own handmade condom. The JFT, MFHB, yes, they are not pro-life, they are pro-birth. They are pro-forced birth, even. Pro-forced birth. But unfortunately, they do have their words or their labels in the vernacular as such, so the default is to call them what they call themselves, which is pro-life. But it's not. They're not pro-life, clearly. Clearly they're not pro-life. Jolie, which state's ridiculous, overstepping, misogynistic, anti-woman, religious zealous abortion laws are we talking about? I got here late. Pretty much just all of them. I mean, we have, differing laws coming up in differing states. Louisiana, there's a weird one. There's the Louisiana House bill. I forget the number. I think it's 813 or something like that. Louisiana has a bill that passed committee and is going to the House and will probably pass. This bill, I've been saying that conservatives are hypocrites when it comes to these so-called pro-life laws, because they don't treat, they'll call abortion murder, but they won't treat abortion as if it was murder. Well, as if maybe somebody was listening to me, and I'm sorry if that was the case. But what happens is now Louisiana is trying to pass a law that would make the punishment for anybody obtaining an abortion, not just those performing it, but anyone obtaining an abortion, would be able to get charged with homicide and treat it exactly like a murder, which is weird. What's weirder, and this is the kicker on why this is so weird, the weirder thing is that there's the Louisiana Right to Life Alliance, or whatever it's called, one of the biggest Louisiana anti-choice, anti-abortion, anti-women's rights organizations, came out against the bill. Why did they come out against the bill? They say that it goes too far. The Right to Life group says that the abortion bill goes too far. Mind frickin' blown. I could not believe that when I saw that. And it's true. And our governor, who is a Democrat but also supports bans on abortion, basically I had to hold my nose in the election booth twice, or maybe even 4 times. I had to hold my nose 4 times because we have open primaries here in Louisiana. So the first time I had to hold my nose. Well, I don't know if I voted for him. I don't know if I voted for him in the primary election back in the first election, but I did vote for him in the runoff because it was him against David Vitter, and I wasn't voting for serious sinner David Vitter. But then in the last election, I know I voted for him in the primary and the runoff, so that's at least 3 times I had to hold my nose and vote for him. But even he, who supports banning abortion as a Democrat, even he says that this law goes too far as well. So you have the anti-choice Democratic governor of Louisiana who says that, he doesn't think that this law is constitutional. He doesn't think it's the right way to go about it. You have the Louisiana Right to Life organization saying that you should not punish, as they say, you shouldn't punish the woman for for making this choice. They're trying to punish the providers, not the women who get them. Don't ask me. Hey, the more people that oppose these draconian bills, the better. Let's see. Bill P. Jesus, Guns, and Babies, the new cry of the Trumplican cult. All of the kids that are killed with guns are a mother's child. Yes, absolutely, Bill P. That's correct. And also, I think we might have to get used to saying things like under his eye, because we're becoming much more like Gilead, especially with the words that Amy Coney Barrett said, and or was it Amy Coney Barrett, or it was part of the ruling. Was it like the nation's stock of infants or something? Well, this is Alito, or let's see, Alito ruling. What is it? What was it called? Stockpile of children. I don't know what the word. I get it wrong. I always get it wrong. Like I don't seem to have the wording right. Somebody could remind me in the chat exactly the word, exactly the words that Alito used when it came to why we should prevent abortions. Is that we have a stockpile of children, basically saying that the individuals who get pregnant are basically broodmares and are only good for breeding purposes. And look, if that's your kink, if you're into that sort of kink, I'm not going to shame you for that, but keep it in private and don't make that the law of the land. Let's see. Roe versus Wade does not give anyone the right to abortion. It gives a person privacy right between patient and doctor to have the procedure. Daily News. Well, I mean, sure, but the ruling from Alito basically made the bad, horrible argument that abortion is not a right because it's not listed in the Constitution, when, as we all know, as we all heard last week, and as I can put up again, Amendment 9, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So just because it's not enumerated doesn't mean it's not a right. And I'll continue to repeat that over and over and over again. Let's see. See if I can scroll down here and try and find that post. I know somebody responded to it. If I find that person's name, I'll be able to... Is it that one? I don't know if it's that one or not. Nope, it's not that one, unfortunately. We'll keep looking for that one. But the wording on it was just so abhorrent that I just don't get the idea why people would even make that argument that, basically that people who can get pregnant are breeding stock, basically. They're only good there for one purpose, and that's to create a national stockpile of children. It's gross, but I can't find the link off the top of my head, or while as I scroll through these comments or my notifications on Facebook, and I think I've gone past where it might have been. So I don't know if the post got taken down or what have you, but let's keep going over the comments. Hide in the shadows. Religious cult followers will sell out their country and other people for their delusion. They'll even spin lies to push the cult later if they have to. True. Christian healthcare companies won't cover out-of-wedlock maternity care. Why not let the people in states decide with their vote? Daily News. Rights should not be determined on a state-by-state basis. We have a constitutional right to equal protection under the law. The Constitution guarantees us that we can have equal protection under the law, which means that if something is a right in one state, it should be a right in the other state. It should be a right nationwide. And rights don't come from government. Remember, when people vote, people are voting on behalf of their government, using the power of state government to do so. So the only thing that the people should be able to vote for are those issues that are granted to the states via the 10th Amendment, because otherwise they don't have the power to work on those things. But powers are not rights, and if you have a right, the individual should not be able to vote on rights. It's another one of the big problems with the Alito ruling. The text of the Alito ruling is that he makes the argument that individuals should have to prove to the court why they have rights, instead of the states having to prove to the court why they have the authority to prevent people from doing particular actions. To me, the real conservative way of limited government looking at things should be the latter. Should be that government should have to prove why it has the authority to prevent certain actions, and not individuals having to prove why a certain action should be considered a right. By default, action should be considered a right, and government should have to prove that they have the authority to prevent that action. Now, on things like murder, sure. Rape, sure. There are plenty of issues where it would be very easy for government to say, because you're protecting innocent persons from other persons. But in many of those circumstances, the reason you're protecting a person from another person is because the other person didn't consent to what happened, be it murder or rape or what have you, theft. All of it is a matter of consent. I didn't consent to you having my items. I didn't consent to you violating me personally. I didn't consent to you murdering me. So government clearly has a role to play when it comes to dealing with those things. So if government has the right, basically authority to step in and prevent people from violating other people's ability to consent. Let's see. Heinrich says more than 5 billion worldwide lack critical thinking skills at a level that keeps them from living and touching reality. Many run through life from stories indoctrinated into their minds as kids during their vulnerable brains open for no. That's the weird thing, though, because I was, talk about religion. I was raised Jewish. I was raised, I went to Hebrew school. I spoke Hebrew from the first grade on. I learned Hebrew from the first grade on. I prayed. We prayed every day. We went to synagogue on Saturdays. We followed the rules. I became bar mitzvah, all that good stuff. But nothing about my religious upbringing that I had prevented me from critical thinking. Like, I can't tell you, I know, me and at least one of my cousins, and I think other ones as well, all independently of each other, when discussing the ideas, of evolution, would say, well, if you had a smart God, why wouldn't God create things to evolve? Why wouldn't God create evolution? So evolution, just because something evolves doesn't necessarily disprove God, and just because God exists doesn't mean it disproves evolution. And because we were not made to believe that you're to reject science, we embrace science. We embraced, it's considered to be a mitzvah, I guess, in Jewish terms, to use your head, to be smart, to be intelligent, to be learned. Those are good things, to be a learned individual, to be somebody who is educated and continue to get educated on all sorts of subjects. But unfortunately, there are some religious people who just completely deny science and don't want anybody to learn anything. So it's not strictly a matter of religion, because you do have religions. Maybe I am not all religionsing, like some people do, not all men. Maybe I'm not all religioning, but lots of people of religion now, lots of people of faith do that, so I guess it's fine. Daily News, why is Daily News asking, how do you get pregnant without a uterus? I don't know. Where did anybody say that you can get pregnant without a uterus? You kind of need a uterus to get pregnant. Now, you can have a biological child that's not growing in your uterus, could be growing in somebody else's uterus if you froze your eggs or you froze your embryos, and then you had somebody volunteer to carry and gestate for your child. That's also something that can happen. But I'm not sure why you're asking how you can get pregnant without a uterus, unless you are talking about when I brought up trans men. Trans men have uteruses, unless they have the procedure to remove them. Let's see. Bill Deacon, hey, shout out. Welcome to the chat. Thank you, Bill, for joining us. Julie, hey, Julie Swenson, thank you for joining us as well. See, oh, there we go. Scroll down, Bill P.S. But Dan said trans men getting pregnant. Yes, trans men are people who were assumed to be female at birth, but they are trans, so they are trans men. Bill Deacon, I just want to say it was an honor to have President Biden make an appearance at an awesome speech today at my IBEW convention today. That is really awesome. I've seen him talk in person, and it's great. I didn't get to meet him or shake his hands. I'd love to one day. My grandparents worked on his initial campaigns for Senate, because I was born in Delaware. My grandparents lived in Delaware, and when he ran for the Senate, they helped him on one of his campaigns. And one of the reasons, even though they weren't alive, they most very recently passed away, like 2019, 2017, or 2018. They very, very recently passed away. They would have been thrilled with the fact that he won the presidency. I think they wanted to see him. I think they wanted to see him win in 2008. They were fine with Obama. I think they would have liked to have seen him run in 2016, but obviously you had the issue of Beau Biden and his untimely passing. But my grandparents really just gushed about how good of a person that Joe Biden was. And even though he wasn't my first choice, I was more of a Warren person at the very beginning of the primaries. Again, I was very happy to see that he won it, and it brought a tear to my eye on the inauguration day, because I just thought, of how happy my grandparents would have been to have seen him reach that goal, to reach that office. See, how does a lot of this spin book banning abortion, critical race BS, Biden laptop BS, all pushed to help provide a shield from the cult members getting wind of January 6th findings and news. That's probably a very good point. They want to hide and obfuscate lots of things. Although there are people who will say that the reason that the leak of the ruling was made was to hide the 2,000 mules crap, which is pretty much crap. Look, Aaron West did say for me, trans men still have a uterus. Thank you for jumping in there when I didn't see it. Question everything. Jolie, liberal Dan, right? What happened to small government? No government overreach. Conservatives right now, they're banning books, telling women what they can and do with their bodies. Well, I mean, I can think conservatives. The conservative claim that they like small government is, I think, based on the idea that if it's small enough, it can fit into a vagina. Yeah, I've often found their small government thing to be hypocritical, because we want small government except for in the areas that we don't. See, all this book banning dumbed down to the masses. Critical thinking skills are anti-ethical to agenda of the right wing, theocrats and autocrats. I mean, Donald Trump did say, I love the poorly educated. I did very well with the poorly educated. I love the poorly educated. Clearly. I mean, you are one of them. Bill Deacon, more like 2,000 morons. I mean, lots of more, but it's more than 2,000. Let me tell you. I tell you what, there are many more than 2,000 morons. But from what I haven't seen it yet, I'm really tempted to do kind of a watch through and upload my synopsis of what I think when I see the video. From things that I've seen about the 2,000 mules thing, is that it's a lot of illogical leaps. Like, I think they bought cell phone tracking data. So it's not connected to any individual person, but you say, okay, here's phone A. Phone A did this and went around town. And if phone A, passed by a drop box more than, 10 times, and then went to a nonprofit like 5 times. That was evidence. It was clear that there was proof. They proved their case, apparently, supposedly, whatever. Yeah, whatever. Let's see. Julie Swenson. Conservatives don't want small government despite using it as a talking point. Right. Well, conservatives don't want a lot of things. I mean, conservatives don't want to ban abortions for themselves neither. Because I guarantee you, if at one of those, sex parties that Madison Cawthorn was talking, excuse me, one of those sex parties Madison Cawthorn was talking about, if they get one of their mistresses pregnant, I guarantee you, if abortion was illegal across the country because they got their bill passed as law, I guarantee you that they would go ahead and ship their mistress off to some place where abortion was legal. That's for damn sure, because the laws don't apply to rich people, and the laws clearly don't apply to the Republicans, because they don't think about the repercussions of the rules. They just don't think that they have to follow their own rules. And usually it's the people who are the most loud about things that are the ones who are the most hypocritical about it. As we said, David Vitter, he was talking about all the sins and people who cheat on your wives should have to resign from office. They should absolutely resign. He called for Bill Clinton to resign, and then it turned out that Bob Livingston, the congressman from the 1st Congressional District of Louisiana, he cheated on his wife, because thanks to Larry Flint, found that out. And then David Vitter was like, yes, Bob Livingston, you should resign too. Go, leave. And then what happened? David Vitter was cheating on his wife. And he was loud, but he never resigned because his rules that he made up don't apply to him. Larry Craig, very anti-LGBT. What did he do? He got found guilty of participating in some illicit and lewd acts in a men's bathroom. Aaron West, pregnant by one of the 2,000 mules. See, Daily News, it seems to me that any medical procedure should be upheld by HIPAA privacy and no one's business. You're just saying that because you don't want to have vaccines be anybody's business, right? Daily News, is that why you're saying that? Because because I don't agree with the idea that getting an injection of a vaccine is a medical procedure, but I have a feeling that that's where you're going with that, right? Daily News, am I correct? Did I guess it properly, or am I wrong? See, Congressman Bob Barr, the Clinton-led prosecution, paid for his second wife's abortion. Yeah, because they don't believe that the rules apply to them. Not whatsoever. Wow, it's like almost an hour into the show and I haven't gotten to my labels discussion yet. Wow. And I haven't taken a single commercial break. I've just been talking straight with just some minor sips of my water. So there we go. And again, the people, I think, who are here in support of Hal, I will have commercials some weeks. So maybe I'll just go ahead and skip commercials this week, though, just because of the fact that I appreciate y'all coming in and I don't want to have to subject y'all to even though most, if not all of the commercials are either promoting stuff that my friends are doing or promoting stuff that I'm doing. So in reality, they're not really commercials. It's just self-promotion of my stuff, but I can self-promote in the middle. Just want to remind everybody, if you're watching the video, if you like what you're hearing, make sure to like the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, make sure to share liberal stuff from Liberal Dan Radio here on YouTube with your friends if you think I make a good point. Spread the word far and wide that Liberal Dan Radio is one of the best shows that you watch or listen to on YouTube. I'm not gonna say the best because I'm not that vain, and I know there are other good ones that y'all like as well. So, Aaron West, the vaccine is public health, not a medical procedure. I agree with you. Daily News, my bad, Dan. Thought it was the other way around. Let's see. I thought that's. So I think that's that was your point, right? Am I right or am I wrong? Bill P. There was one back in the 50s. Sired a few babies. His name was Blue Moon, which was hilarious. Blue Moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and let me view. I said, Blue Moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and let me blue. Anyway, my bad singing for the day. All right, maybe you'll get some more singing later. Who knows? I'm glad you like it, Julie. I appreciate that. I appreciate the compliment. That's what I try to do. I try to be informative. And And one of the things that I've actually tried to do is I try to listen to Hal Sparks more, simply because of the fact that I don't want to duplicate what he's saying. Although he was talking about, I think earlier today, he was talking a little bit about progressives. What's the word he was using on the title of his show, of his podcast, or the evening Mega Worldwide was regressive progressives. Was that it? And I was like, were you looking at my show prep? Because I was trying to talk about labels, and I was going to be talking about, progressives and leftists and liberals and what the difference is between the two or the three, and why I think while I do have some criticism, that it's fine to discuss the criticisms that you have with each other, that we have a more urgent goal to deal with right now, so maybe we shouldn't be as nitpicky about things. Like, for example, one of the memes I've seen is you can call somebody who is a, quote, leftist anything, just you can call them a socialist, you can call them a communist, you can call them this, that, the other, just don't call them a liberal. And the first time I ever heard somebody go, I'm not a liberal, I'm a leftist, I was like, what? And I understand why the difference is now. I understand that, that it's just more, people, leftists are, liberal, going from my right to left, there's center, liberal, progressive, leftist. Now, I call myself Liberal Dan. And the reason I call myself Liberal Dan is because somebody else called me Liberal Dan. I'd call up to a local, a different conservative talk show than the one I usually get my clips from. This talk show is not in existence right now. But this guy, his name is John Osterland. He used to go by Ozone up north. Used to be friends with a duo of Opie and Anthony. And I didn't know that at the time, until much later. But I'd be like, hey, it's Dan. At the time, I think started living in Kenner. I think I was living in Kenner. Hey, it's Dan from Kenner. And I'd call him in, driving in. And he'd be like, ooh, look at his. It's Liberal Dan. And, hey, Liberal Dan, what's going on? And we have their conversation. I'd make my points, and we'd go. And it was one time we were at an Arena Football League game, and they were doing a live broadcast. Their channel was doing a live broadcast from there, and I sat down next to him, and we did about 45 minutes of radio, and he was really impressed that I was able to do the radio show. I'm like, people tell me I have a voice for radio. As long as they don't tell me I have a face for radio, I'm happy. Then I moved on and started having this podcast and whatever. But he called me Liberal Dan, and it kind of stuck because I would meet people who listened to the show. I was like, yeah, I also listen to the show, whatever. And I call in, I'm Liberal Dan. They'd be like, oh my God, you're Liberal Dan? I can't believe I just met Liberal Dan. I'm like, what? I'm not a celebrity. This is silly. But enough people got excited over meeting Liberal Dan. Hey, Kinky Streets, what's going on? A lot of people were so excited to meet Liberal Dan where I went ahead and I registered the domain name. I got the Blog Talk Radio thing going. I started investigating items that I could, places where I could start doing a radio show. And so I ended up on Blog Talk Radio. Now I'm doing both on Blog Talk Radio and on YouTube. I think YouTube's the better venue for most things, but Blog Talk Radio does allow me to have my little sound bank that I get to play. So there's that, which is nice. But the little brain fart. Even though I'm called Liberal Dan, in reality, I like to call myself a pragmatic progressive. So what's a pragmatic progressive? I personally, as I said before, I like Medicare for All. I think Medicare for All is a good deal. I like universal basic income. A lot of things that I would like to have. Lots of things that are likes to haves. But there's also the idea that I understand that sometimes incrementalism is a thing, and you need to do things incrementally sometimes to get to ultimately where you want to go. You can't just get everything you want up front. And one of the problems I have with many people on my side of the aisle is they tend to not go for, you don't ask for what you want. You ask for more than what you want, and then you negotiate backwards to what you want. So the ability to that's where I think one of the problems with the Affordable Care Act started is they should have started bigger. They maybe should have started with Medicare for All and then gotten back to the Affordable Care Act with a public option, which would have made it a lot better. and maybe getting rid of some of the other stuff. But you don't start where you want to end up. You start well beyond that. You give up some things. You have to give up some things. Joe the Liberal Dan is a great name. Love it. Thank you. Bill P, I got Moderna regular and 2 boosters, and now my 5G is still not working. I have 2 funny, cute videos where I'm after my wife got her first 2 shots. I took my cell phone, and after the first one, I only had like 3 bars. I'm like, nope, it's not working. Sorry. But then, funnily enough, that after her second shot, I put my phone next to her as I was recording. I was like, oh, I have 5 bars now. Your 5G must be working. So, yeah. I actually got Novavax. I'm oddball. Mine's not even under a EUA at the moment. Mine is separate. Mine's not even an mRNA vaccine. So I would have hoped that Novavax would have released their stuff with the EUA enough already. It's just so that the people with the conspiracy theories of the mRNA stuff would be like, okay, well, I'll take the Novavax then because it's not mRNA. But now we're at the point now where there's so much damage done by conservative activists against these vaccines that it'll be very hard to convince anybody to take one, even though all the reasons why they're not taking them are just full of baloney. But anyway, back to the topic of liberals and progressives and leftists. And one of the reasons I started thinking of this was kind of a criticism that I sometimes have of people who call themselves leftists, of people who are who like will say the words like, have you ever heard the words I owe nobody my vote, or no politician is owed a vote? And okay, that's true. I don't believe that any politician is owed a vote, but they would do that to be like, well, what? But then they'll go follow on like in 2016. Well, Hillary has to give me a reason to vote for her. I'm just not going to vote against Trump. And I'm like, well, I mean, the reason to vote for Hillary, even if you believe half the lies that they say about Hillary, one of the main reasons to vote for her is 3 Supreme Court justices and Donald Trump not getting to name them, right? So the idea that one would be like, well, I need Hillary to explain to me why I need to vote for her, or I need Joe Biden to explain to me why I need to vote for him instead of just simply voting against. To me, that's a vote of privilege. To me, let's see, my husband's CEO taught him always ask for more when he went in for a raise. So my husband asked for 50 his salary, and within 10 years he got it. Valuable, never undersell yourself. Wow, 50% more of his salary. That's awesome. I mean, I've gotten decent size, I'm doing fine, doing well at my current job. Definitely higher than previous jobs that I've had, but yeah, definitely never want to undersell yourself. But anyway, back to the point, is that people talk about privilege a lot, and people talk about, acting and not recognizing your privilege. But I think a lot of these people who make the argument, either don't understand their own privilege and don't understand why that argument is a point of privilege. Because if you can feel safe enough in this country to not go and vote, and as Hal says, and I'll repeat this lots of times, and I'll repeat it exactly how Hal says it as best as I can. When you're given the choice between 2 evils, always choose the lesser evil. Always choose the lesser evil. But and if your choice is between the lesser 2 evils and you choose to not decide, you still have made a choice. And that choice is harmful to marginalized groups. That choice is harmful to women. The choice is harmful to black people, indigenous people, other persons of color. That choice is harmful to LGBTQA folks. The choice is so when you don't vote, you're voting against people who need your protection, who needs your voice to help drown out the baddies. So even if you're nonplussed about the idea of the candidate that you're voting, of the candidates that are voting there, you need to, people are like, both parties are the same, man. Like, that's one of my biggest criticisms, I think, of some folks who might be more left than me, is simply that, they're both the same. Both parties are the same. Two wings, same bird, they'll say. But at the end of the day, no, they're not the same. One party is trying to take away access to abortions, to birth control pills, to health care in general, they want to overturn all these Supreme Court rulings that affirmed individual right to freedom and privacy. So clearly they're not the same thing. You may think that both sides serve corporate interests, and I know that's a big beef by people on the left, or people left of me, is that they're corporate interests, and I have a problem with that too. I'd rather not see the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party politicians pandering to corporations, but if you're going to have one side pandering to corporations and the other side pandering to corporations, I'd rather pick the side pandering to corporations that also protects body autonomy, that also protects gay rights, that also protects minority rights, that also is going to do something against, the systemic violence that takes place in our system against black people, Latino people, indigenous people, other people of color. So it's not the same. They're not the same. But while I talk about all that stuff, and while I talk about how, I wish the individuals would stop, would stop voting with their privilege and vote instead on behalf of people who are not privileged and who need help, I also think that we can't spend too much time arguing with each other. It's getting people to anybody who's the center and leftwards of center, getting them to all get on the same page is like herding cats. The right wing, they fall in line. That's what the poorly educated do. I'm not saying everybody on the right is poorly educated, but Donald Trump loves the poorly educated, and he loves them because they fall in line. He loves them because they'll believe the bullshit that he's bringing. They believe everything that he tells them. Everything he says is true. He is a cult of personality. But they will fall in line. Like, I remember I was working at a hospital when I was in college, but at the same time, I was also running for Congress. And I asked one of the coworkers that I had, I was like, "Hey, you live in the 1st Congressional District?" "Yeah, I do." I asked her, I was like, "Look, can you vote for me? I would sincerely like to ask you for your vote." And she goes, "I can't. I have to vote who the Republican Party tells me to vote for." Now, this person was the charge nurse on the floor. I remember it was the 4th floor, the 4th Clara Center, I think is the wing. The 4 Clara Center or 4 Clara West was the wing. And this was like what? This was in 2004. So 18 years ago? Yeah, 18 years ago. And I remember the floor that she worked on. That's how much this affected me. I can't vote for anybody unless the Republican Party tells me who to vote for. Think for yourself. But clearly, I would think that somebody who made it to the point of being a charge nurse would have the ability to think for themselves, but I guess not. So clearly she didn't vote for me. And clearly I didn't win, because I was running against a very popular Bobby Jindal. So, whatever. Jolie, I still think it's important to get Novavax approved. I think it will help with some of the hesitancy. I don't understand what the problem is. It's approved everywhere else. I know, and I have some stocks in Novavax, and I wish to hell some good news would come, because I missed my opportunity to sell at 1,000 up, and now I'm like 1,000 down, and I'm upset with myself. See, that's why I don't like that they didn't want Hillary. Bill P. Can DeSouza be charged with mule abuse? Maybe. Bill P. I just saw the Eastman emails. It's so sad that there's more and more evidence to charge these people, but yet nothing. I have to look up the Eastman emails, I think. I don't think I've looked that up yet. New York Times is all over it with Politico. We can do a search on that, and let's just take a peek and see. But again, so what I'm talking about, those, is when I want to, there's too much fighting amongst people center and leftwards. We can't spend so much time fighting each other that we don't recognize that there's a bigger enemy out there. We need to put aside our differences. and we need to stop fighting amongst each other. Like, but who's to blame about it? Like, but should we be finding somebody to blame? Like, who is responsible in this situation to be the voice of reason, the voice of peace? What and how do we go ahead and deal with that issue? And how do we go ahead and convince? Let's all get together. Let's all sing Kumbaya. Let's all work together to defeat this evil, and then we can work out all the problems we have with each other. I know that the problems that some people might have with that is like, well, if that's what we're focused on, then we're going to ignore a lot of the stuff that people in each group want to see happen. And that's potentially a problem. But what we have to recognize is that the harm that is caused by us not working together is greater than the harm of not doing the things that individual groups want to get done. And again, putting leftists, progressives, and liberals together and trying to get us to all work in one block to defeat the right and make sure that they can't trample over existing rights. It's hard. It's hurting cats. It's very hard to do. Bill Deacon, NRA equals numerous Russian agents. Yes, that's awesome. GOP was infiltrated with Kremlin ops back in 2013 via the NRA. Yep. Let's see. John Eastman testifies on Capitol Hill. Attorney John Eastman urged Republican legislators in Pennsylvania to retabulate the state's popular vote and throw out tens of thousands of absentee ballots in order to show Donald Trump with the lead, according to newly unearthed emails sent in December 2020 as Trump pressured GOP lawmakers to subvert his defeat. This recalculation, he posited in an exchange with one GOP state lawmaker, would help provide some cover for Republicans to replace Joe Biden's electors from the state with a slate of pro-Trump electors, part of a latch-ditch bid to overturn elections results. Per the exchange, Eastman suggested that GOP legislators could simply cite their concerns with Pennsylvania's absentee ballot procedures and then use historical data to discount each candidate's total by a prorated amount based on the absentee percentage those candidates otherwise received. Wow. Having done the math, you'd be left with a significant Trump lead that would bolster the argument for the legislature adopting a slate of Trump electors, perfectly within your authority to do anyway, but now bolstered by the untainted popular vote. The untainted popular vote, which would then be tainted. Eastman wrote in December 4th, 2020 email. The exchange is part of a batch of emails obtained by the University of Colorado, where Eastman worked as a visiting professor at the time he was helping Trump strategize ways to remain in power. The emails were obtained via public records requests by the Colorado Ethics Institute, which sent them along to the January 6th committee last month. It's unclear whether the select committee has previously obtained these emails, which are available via public records requests, or whether they are in receipt of the Colorado group's files. Boom. So we'll have to go over look at all the emails together just to kind of go through them and see, but I don't know if we're going to do that this time. I'm not going to take a commercial break, but what I am going to do is I'll take a small break talking about the arguing with each other, and then play the words of redneck wisdom, just to give myself an opportunity to get a bigger gulp of water so I stop coughing all over myself. So here we go. This week's words of redneck wisdom.
And now, words of redneck wisdom, brought to you by Liberal Dan Radio.
But we're all greatly blessed, so we got to protect our blessings. Listen, brothers and sisters, there's many forms of abortion, even slow incremental abortion. The mask robs you of 1/3 of your oxygen. It forces you to rebreathe your own pathogens and CO2. That's a very slow form of murdering a human being. Now, they're taking away the baby formula. This government is, secretly organizing a food disaster. They're coming after all of us. They want to keep murdering these little babies and they keep throwing Molotov cocktails at police and all kinds of stuff out there. They're going after the Supreme Court. This is war, brothers and sisters. The deep state satanic government alliance is planning to destroy our country, and they exist. They're alive, and they accuse us of the crimes that they're committing against us. Another thing I want to tell you, by the way, brothers and sisters, they love their uniform. Their uniform is a mask and a hoodie and gloves, just like all the mules in that movie 2000 Mules. And they have an operation going on throughout the United States of America. And the police in this country need to track them down and put them in jail. Just like they need to take those people that are attacking the Supreme Court judges' houses and put them in jail. There's laws against that. Well, I mean, why? How can they keep telling our military and our local police to stand down when we're under attack, brothers and sisters? This has to stop. We need to stop what's going on in the other parts of the country, here in Jefferson right now. Protect our churches. Double the security guards in all the churches. Look what they're doing at the churches. It's an abortion thing. It's a huge distraction, and you're right, Jeff. They're getting ready to tell us that, we got to get more shots. And there's a new variant out there. There is a variant out there. It's a very, very evil government out there trying to do this to us. So wake up, stand up, rise to the wiser. Put in the mind of Jesus Christ and the full arm of the Lord. Rescue their shit and defend and help us. And get out there in the battlefield. That's right. Arm yourselves and learn what Jesus wants us to do. That's the way we can survive. Amen.
And this concludes Words of Redneck Wisdom, brought to you by Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right.
Yes, I listened to that whole show, so y'all don't have to. Wow. I mean, and this guy calls up, he always has the same sort of quick talk, like, wake up, brothers and sisters, we need to do this, we need to do that. And he's upset. The other day, he brought up the idea that the, he basically made the claim that the problem with the hepatitis outbreak amongst children that is going on, that there are increased numbers of children who are coming up with hepatitis. And he said that the reason for that is because, of the vaccinations. Well, a simple internet search would find that the median age of the children who are dealing with this hepatitis outbreak is 3. You can't get the vaccine at 3. That's the median age. So, and the highest age is 6. Now, ages 5 and 6 can be vaccinated, but the vast majority of the people the kids who are dealing with this hepatitis outbreak can't get the vaccine. So the claim that it's the vaccine causing it is clearly full of crap. But this guy is full of conspiracy theories, as you just heard. I mean, the mask conspiracy, this guy, I feel sorry for this guy because this guy did lose his wife during the pandemic. But he believes that he lost his wife because the vaccine killed her, and I'm not convinced of that at all. Many conservatives tend to have this idea that, or confusion, where they confuse causation and correlation. They'll say, okay, somebody took the vaccine, and then at some point later they died. So that means the vaccine caused the death. No. Let's see. It's Daily News. It amazes me how people get distracted and angry by the hack of Hillary's emails rather than the content. What? I don't know what you're talking about. I still don't know what Daily News says. Perhaps she didn't want to hurt your feelings, so she gave that. What are you talking about? What thing are you responding to with who not wanting to hurt my feelings? I think I missed something there. Bill P. I've been wearing a mask every day since organ transplant in 2017. I wear an oxygen monitor. It never has been below 98% saturation. Yeah, and the idea that you make that by breathing in your own toxins or whatever he said makes you more sick is just absurd. You're not going to get more sick because, something that you would have coughed out land on your mask. It's silly. Yeah, Bill D, it amazes me how people still go on and on about Hillary's emails. Well, the reason I bring up Hillary's emails sometimes is because people use them as an excuse to not vote for Hillary, and now for every bad thing that we see because we had Donald Trump in there for 4 years, I'll post the but her emails. Like this. My favorite one is where it's like high water and you only see the tippity top of the sign, and the tippity top of the sign says but her emails. That's my favorite meme to work to use when discussing things that could have been rectified had we had people voting for Hillary instead of switching from Bernie to Trump. Now, and again, is that back to the topic where I was talking about was, is focusing on that, is bringing up that fact that PBS found reasonable to bring up, or is it just going to cause them to argue? Do we have, there's fragility in lots of places. There's fragility in, clearly on the right. They don't like to be criticized at all. You criticize them, they just get defensive or whatever. You have male fragility, you have white fragility, you have all sorts of fragility out there. But there's also fragility on the left. If you are critical of somebody on the left, and especially maybe perhaps some of the younger crowd of the leftists, sometimes you get bad results, and you cause them to just not want to work with you, not want to cooperate with you, and just want to reject you out of hand because they don't feel like you're listening to them. And well, everybody should be listened to, and we should all be discussing the best ways to improve this country, to make it better, how to fight these encroachments on rights and liberties that conservatives are trying to push. How much is too much, and how much is not enough? Like, do you just look the other way while people are doing things that are non-constructive to the group? Like, I think one of the examples is, like, I think there's, if you want to talk about, like, what's going on between Hal and the Young Turks, like, clearly, I think I align more with Hal, even though I'm probably to the left of Hal, but like Anna Kasparian or whatever on Young Turks is clearly to the left of me. And I don't want to get in the middle of all that, but like, how much of the complaining about what the Democrats do or don't do is too much, or how much do you have to just deal with and swallow? Like, I mean, today, like, I'm good friends with Demonox, Brian, the first Liberal Dan Radio patron. He's not in chat today. I'm hoping he's okay. But he's not in chat today, but he doesn't like Biden. Now he voted for Biden, I think, definitely over Trump, but he just is very upset with Biden and Biden's ineffectiveness to get things done. Now, he clearly wanted Bernie, and that's fine. I would have been happy with Bernie. I would have happily voted for Bernie if Bernie pulled off the win. But when I bring up why Bernie lost, they don't like it either. But, like, I don't know who else would have been more effectual. I don't know if Bernie Sanders would have gotten the nomination. Would he have been able to get more senators, or would he have gotten less senators? I don't know. It's hard to tell. I don't know if Bernie Sanders running in Georgia pulls enough people for him to win Georgia. I don't know if it pulls enough people for the Democratic senators to win Georgia. I don't know. I don't have that information available in front of me. I don't think we can speak to that because we're not on Earth 2. We're not on the alternate version of Earth where Bernie was able to pull that off. So it's a very hard assumption. It's very hard for me to think that anybody in this particular circumstance could do a better job at what needs to be done than Joe Biden. Now, was Joe Biden a little overly optimistic about his idea of being able to get to work together with the people on the Republican Party because he served in the Senate with them so long ago? Yeah. He was very overly optimistic about that, and too much so. One of the things during the campaign I would shake my head at was him going, I will work together with, like, Mitch McConnell or whatever. Like, no, you won't, because Mitch McConnell that you worked with is not the same Mitch McConnell as today. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is an obstructionist and is somebody who will prevent you from getting everything he can from blocking. He will stop everything he can and not let you get a single victory in, because that's how the Republicans are today. Even though that show that I got that clip from earlier just played, that host will call Mitch McConnell a rhino. He doesn't believe that Mitch McConnell is a true conservative. That's how far gone the conservatives are. And that's one of the things that I find amusing when we have such fighting amongst liberals and progressives and leftists and people who are like, don't call me a liberal, I'm a leftist, or people who are upset about, being mistaken for one or the other, or the large amount of fights that we have as the three of us. The people on the right are so far gone. They're so far to the right that the differences between a liberal and a progressive and a leftist are inconsequential to them because of the vastness, the vast distance that they're away. Whatever big differences exist as we're looking at each other are nothing compared to that distance. Nothing at all whatsoever. That person would call us all socialists. They do call us all socialists. They call leftist socialists. They call progressive socialists. They call liberal socialists. They call Biden. Biden is center left. They call him a socialist, for frick's sake. I mean, the idea, they use words they don't even know what they mean. I played that clip from that Cash Money guy from that station who was, having a big problem with me or whatever. But he even said he looked at socialism, and what he defined as socialism was authoritarianism. He was pushing for socialism, but he didn't realize that because they don't understand what words mean. Words have meanings, and sometimes people say that I too much argue semantics. Well, guess what? Words have meaning, and if you're incorrectly using a word, I'm going to correct you. That's not me arguing semantics. That's me arguing facts, and you arguing that you're calling something that it's not because you don't understand what that thing is. You don't understand what socialism is, so you're not accurately calling something socialist. Let's see. Daily News. People go on and on about Trump working for Russians. Their proof is Trump asked Russia for help fighting Hillary's emails. I mean, it's like you listen to my podcast. It's like you listen to my show. Yes, that it was him begging Russia for help. And China, too. But it's not the only reason that Trump was working for the president. There's other evidence of Trump working for Putin. It's just, that was an example from the campaign. From the campaign of him. When did Donald Trump... No, here it is. Donald Trump begging Russians to help. There you go. That's all you should need to know, that Donald Trump was begging Russia for help. But what else did Donald Trump do? Donald Trump destabilized NATO. He worked to destabilize NATO. Who benefits from the destabilization of NATO? Putin. Trump ceded power to Putin in the Middle East, allowing Putin to expand his sphere of influence in the Middle East. Trump helped negotiate an end to the price war of oil between OPEC and Putin. Who does that benefit? Well, it benefited the domestic producers of oil because they were seeing their prices of oil drop as well. So Trump did want to stop that price war from going on to help domestic producers who are now not helping at all because they're hoarding oil and not drilling and artificially increasing the price of oil, as such artificially increasing the price of gas. But by doing so, he also helped Putin. People ask, well, why did Putin go into Ukraine now, but he didn't go under Trump? Because Putin didn't have to spend a single red penny. I don't know if that's an appropriate term. Putin didn't have to spend 1 ruble to try and increase his sphere of influence and gain more power for himself during the Trump presidency. Donald Trump did that all for him. Donald Trump weakened NATO, attacked NATO members, made the alliance weaker. Donald Trump just looked the other way for the issues going on in Syria. Allowed Russia to have a more sphere of influence there. He did whatever he could to help Putin. So no, Putin didn't have to spend 1 single ruble over the whole thing. He didn't have to spend any time or effort to gain influence because Trump was helping him do it all by himself. Now that Biden's in office, Biden's strengthening NATO. Biden's not going to tolerate that crap in the Middle East. Biden is not going to allow Putin to gain more spheres of influence. So what does Putin do? He takes military action to try and increase his influence, to try and show a show of force, to say, oh, we are a force to be reckoned with. But, of course, he's doing terribly because they did not anticipate the resiliency of Ukraine. But as we've heard before on many shows, the Republicans here will spout Putin's talking points because the Republicans know. If the Republicans didn't know in their heart of hearts that having Putin strong only helps Trump, they wouldn't be talking Vladimir Putin's talking points. But they know, deep down inside, they know that being an apologist for Putin, making excuses for the invasion of Ukraine, casting doubt on anybody who's trying to support Ukraine, pushing this so-called Nazi narrative, and trying to flip the script and make it about China and Biden. They're doing that because they think it's going to help Trump get elected. But why is it going to help Trump get elected? Because it's helping Putin. And Putin wants Trump reelected because Putin would love to not have to go to war to gain more influence. He would love to not have to do that. He's having his ass handed to him because he doesn't have that anymore in the White House. He wants it again. He wants his good friend. He doesn't want to have to do peacekeeping. Take a piece of Ukraine and keep it. See, Aaron West, my dad did the Bernie to Trump flop. I don't even know if I can talk to my parents if that happened. My mom was a very big Bernie supporter. I think my dad was on board with Biden for everything, but my mom voted for Biden as well, and she knew the importance of it. Let's see. Jolie, my dad was and always was and still shall be a Trump supporter. We argue about it all the time. It's infuriating. I can't imagine. That's one of the things. Like, a lot of people look at older people and are and are confused about, and don't understand what they're thinking of it, and they have this disconnect politically. And but my family is, I don't think there's anybody in the family that, at least that I was raised with, because my mom was adopted. But on my dad's side of my family, and I don't really talk to much of any. That's not much of a connection between my mom's side of the family and myself at the moment, other than my mom. But my dad's side of the family, everybody, there's not a single conservative person that I know of. I don't think anybody's conservative. Even my grandparents, when they were still living, they were liberal. I remember going to Thanksgiving dinners or hanging out with my grandparents Thanksgiving week, and we would talk about politics, and my grandfather would be making arguments in favor of gay marriage. A 90-year-old man arguing why we should have gay marriage. I mean, my grandparents were woke. And I wish they could have been alive to see Biden get elected. But my grandparents were woke. My mother-in-law will say, she's like, I don't like abortions, but I don't think it's the government's role to get in the way. So my grandmother's liberal. I don't think I know anybody in my family. I mean, my mother-in-law, is liberal. I don't know anybody in my family who is not left of center. Let's see. Oh, I just lost a bunch of my chat. I didn't lose the chat, but I scrolled down too far. Bill P., my neighbor's wife died 2 months after the vaccine from a 3-pack-a-day cigarette habit. Yeah, that's the thing. But the conservatives at that point would probably say it was from the vaccine. Well, she lived this long smoking 3 packs a day, but now that she got the vaccine, she died. That's suspect. That's suspicious. That's weird. Julie says, wow, Bill P., wearing a mask is nothing for you. I have a friend in Japan, and they wear a mask frequently. Even before COVID, it's considered polite to not share your germs when you feel sick. And that's one. When I read Bill's thing, I was about to make the same point that Julie made. And that's that, yes, a lot of countries have embraced masking well before COVID. And one of the things I was thinking is maybe during flu season, since we showed how social distancing and masking can stop the flu from spreading, because during COVID we didn't have much flu, because we were social distance and wearing masks. that maybe people would say, hey, that works. Maybe we can do it again to reduce the flu deaths and reduce flu sicknesses as well. But of course, no. The conservatives take that as a conspiracy theory. Oh, well, they'll be like, oh, well, what happened to the flu? Well, it must have turned into COVID then, because they don't like to understand things. Let's see. Aaron West, my dad did the Bernie Trump flop. Julie, anybody? Let's see. What happened to the bust statue Trump stole from the White House when he left? I don't know. Oh, Daily News. The nurse you spoke of when you ran for office. Okay. We didn't really discuss much in the way of policy, though. I'm thinking that she was being honest. I'm assuming she was being honest with me, that the reason that she had to vote for whoever it is the Republican Party told her to vote for. Let's see. Aaron, thankfully my dad saw the light. Thank goodness. Trump rallied about Hillary smashing phones. Now his phones are missing. Trump always projects like a true dictator. Yep, that's true. Many times and that's a weird thing, because in that little Words of Redneck Wisdom, he was like, the liberals are always doing what they're claiming that we do. But that's what the conservatives do. Nadia Yvette Chambers, Biden is to the further right than the Tories in the UK. He's not center left. I mean, okay. That's a point that I wanted to make earlier, and thank you for bringing it up. In American politics, Biden is center left. In American politics, Bernie is a leftist. In European politics, Bernie is center left. So, like I was just talking about, so when we talk about where people are on the political spectrum, there you do have to consider if you're talking about American politics or global politics. Because in American politics, we consider ourselves more to the left than the rest of the world would consider us. So yeah, I'm sure Biden would very well be on the right side of the political spectrum when it came to many of the issues, at least, if not a bunch of them. But in American politics, Biden is still center left. And that's my point. Let's see. Along with, I don't know. That hasn't gotten enough play. The 7 hours of missing tapes, or the 7 hours of missing phone logs. Why that should be getting more airtime. And I heard about it a little bit on the news, but that should be getting a lot more airtime, because that's definitely suspicious, dude. To not hear anything for those hours until Donald Trump decided to say how much he loved the people who were invading the Capitol. Let's see. Bill Barr should be charged for misleading the public on the Mueller report, as it shows connections to Russia that Barr did not disclose. Trump ignored American servicemen getting killed by groups paid by Russia to kill U.S. soldiers. Craig Unger's book explains how Trump's been a Russian asset forever. Started with the TVs bought for Trump hotels. Be an interesting read. I'm sure it's true. Because isn't he indebted to like World Bank and to a bunch of Russian oligarchs? Isn't that part of the reason that the only place he could get loans, because he was too busy defrauding everybody, that now they probably said, look, we loan you all this money, but you run for president now, and we make sure you win, because we need America in our pocket. So we're not going to call in debts unless you win. So you win, we don't call in debts. You lose, we call in debts. We call for head. Julie Swenson, my mom still writes Ralph Nader on the ballot. Hilarious. How do shadows go, DuckDuckGo? Time, Russia, Billboard, FBI. You'll get some insight into other fake billionaires that control the major media outlet. Funded by Kremlin through venture funds. Daily News, Trump got Germany to stop buying oil from Russia and buy from us. There's videos of Putin singing and speaking in perfect English. He sang his American song, Blueberry Hill. I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill. On Blueberry Hill. That should be a funny karaoke. Of course, usually if I was going to do it, and I wouldn't do I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill. On Blueberry Hill, when I found you. Is not how I would normally sing it in karaoke. I'd probably just do the Louis Armstrong. I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill. There you go. My impression of the night, or other impression of the night. Daily News. Trump did not start any new wars. What new wars did Biden start? Daily News. I don't think Biden started any new wars. I mean, a new war started when Biden was president, but it wasn't Biden's fault. It was Putin starting it. Let's continue to scroll down. Trump negotiated the pullout from Afghanistan. Biden just honored the agreement against Blaine. State Department and DOD testified to that fact. Absolutely. And Trump just whittled us down to very little troops and then expected us to, he wasn't even wanting, I don't think, to pull out totally. Trump's pullout game is not strong. And so Biden had to deal with a big mess on many aspects. Afghanistan, COVID, and in COVID, the vaccine distribution network. There was no vaccine distribution network when Trump left office. Biden had to do that. And Biden was like, look, we're going to get these vaccines distributed and we're going to do 100,000 or 100 million in arms by X date. And then he got 200. He doubled his goal. Jolie, are you laughing at my impression because it's bad, or are you laughing at my impression because it's good? Trump administration took one of the most aggressive actions against Russia, according to Daily News. What action was that, Daily News? What aggressive action did Trump take against Russia? I want to see what you think that is. Trump has played on those will take blah, blah, blah. China never before bought beef from U.S. until Trump. Okay, so I mean, it's not a huge. It's probably because I don't know. Looking at Trump steaks, maybe he's good at selling, beef at some point, and then until he figures out a way to cash out from the beef sales and have his company go bankrupt. Trump was busy selling our corn and beef to China while COVID was spreading to the U.S. and he was denying it. Yep. Trump did actually. Yemen put more into the country. Just like COVID, people died with COVID, not from COVID. That line is so Daily News, you're better than that. And maybe the people in chat might not believe that you're better than that, but you're better than that, Daily News. So, let's look at other diseases. HIV, for example. A lot of people who get infected with HIV die of pneumonia because it weakens the immune system, making you more susceptible to other things. So a lot of times you have HIV, you'll die of pneumonia. It is correct to still say that you died because you got HIV. There are people with lifelong conditions that are well managed who got COVID and died because the COVID made them weaker. The COVID took their well managed situation and turned it into a bad one. Those people died of COVID, not with COVID. Are there people that died with COVID and not of COVID? Sure. Absolutely. I think there was a case of somebody, there was a motorcycle accident. The guy went to the hospital from a motorcycle accident. He also had COVID, so they treated his COVID, and then he died of the injuries from the motorcycle accident. That would be somebody who died with COVID and not from COVID. But still, you have to put on the death certificate, like the first line of the major causes of death, and then you have the second line where you put like the other things that you might have had that may or may not have contributed to death. So that second line will still put COVID because he was found to have COVID. But that is a death with, not from COVID. But there are plenty of people who had conditions, who were well managed, well taken care of. They had plenty of years ahead of them because their conditions were well managed, well taken care of. And then what happened? They got COVID because somebody couldn't be bothered to wear a mask, couldn't be bothered to social distance. Virus spread, people died. And Donald Trump, I'm not saying he's to blame for every single COVID death that took place during his presidency and shortly thereafter, but I will say that he's responsible for a crap ton because he put it into people's heads that you don't need to do things to protect yourselves. He mocked mask using. He didn't want to, I don't want to sit behind the Resolute desk. He was a snake oil salesman, pushing hydroxychloroquine, pushing, injecting people with disinfectant. Like, he just wanted to sell bad things to people. And people then continued to he said, and I'll say this time and time again, I knew what Donald Trump meant when he said that the response to COVID is a Democrat hoax. I knew that he wasn't saying that the virus was a hoax in and of itself. I knew he was trying to say that, I guess it's overblown, so to speak, because he likes to sugarcoat things. But I also knew that as soon as he said what he said, that the Democrat response to the virus is a hoax, that all his listeners, all his followers, all his supporters would hear was, the virus is a hoax. And then they would continue to believe that the virus is a hoax and would just not believe anything else that anybody said because he's their Christ. He's their God. He's their one who they worship. And so him saying that was probably one of the most irresponsible things that he did. Furthermore, he admitted to Woodward that he lied, that he told the American public that it was not bad, that it was no worse than the flu, but he told Woodward it's much worse than the flu. But again, he likes to sugarcoat things so much that he has diabetes, or that we all should have diabetes at this point, because he kept misrepresenting the threat and downplaying the threat because he didn't want people to see what we were going through as a nation under his presidency. That's why in Tulsa, he admitted to begging the people to stop testing. Slow down the testing, he said. He didn't want more testing, he wanted less testing. Why? Because more testing would reveal the amount of cases that truly existed in this country. Now, what we needed was more testing from as soon as we could get it, because that would have allowed us to surgically handle like a surgical strike and go, okay, well, the outbreak is really bad here, so let's deal with that. Maybe we shut down that town, but not the entire country. But no, he didn't want to test because he didn't want people knowing the numbers because he thought that would hurt him. Even though in reality, knowing where the virus was and effectively dealing with it would have been the thing that could have helped him, but didn't. Rant. I know I've said that before in a podcast. Diabetics would have lived if they would have not come down with COVID, exactly, hide in the shadows. Jolie, because it was good and funny, thank you very much. I appreciate it. One time I was at karaoke and I was doing Wonderful World. And there was 3 people like at the corner of the bar. And I'm up there, I'm singing away, I'm doing my Louis Armstrong imitation. I'm not having a sore throat, so I'm doing it better than normal. And then all of a sudden, the one guy turns around and faces me, and his jaw hits the floor, or would have if it could have. And after the song was over, he came up to me, and he's like, I was talking to my friends that whole time, or for the first half of your song that you were singing. And he goes, and I asked my people why they were playing Wonderful World on the radio. And they're like, that's not the radio, that's the dude singing. And he turned around and saw me, and that's when his jaw dropped. And I was like, there was another time on a cruise. We went on a cruise in Royal Caribbean, I think in 2019, clearly before the pandemic. We're going on a cruise in July. I'm mildly worried about it, but I think we'll be okay. Anyway, we're going on a cruise. We went on a cruise. I did karaoke on the cruise, and one of the songs that I did was Wonderful World. And this was neat because it wasn't just regular old karaoke. It was live music karaoke. So I had a band behind me as I was singing. That was really freaking awesome. So I did Wonderful World, and then I did Take On Me. And, Take On Me has that, like, really, so, and like the next day I saw one of the musicians, he was helping out with one of the auctions or something, and he was like, how do you do that? I was like, how do I do what? how do you do the raspy Wonderful World voice and then do the take on me? I'm like, well, honestly, I just drink a lot, mostly water, sometimes alcohol, and just keep it all wet, and that way it'll be good. But I was shook that a person who has a career as a professional musician was asking me how I did something musically. I'm like, that's so weird. Anyway, all right, let's go. Daily News, no missing pages from January 6th White House switchboard logs report. Really? Are you sure? What? Are we back to the Muslim ban too? I love when conservatives, like on TikTok, I made the statement about how Trump was being bigoted about certain things. He's like, because this is the way the conversation always goes about this. They're like, Democrats called Trump bigoted when he tried to implement a travel ban to China during COVID. They fought against him taking action against China, against travel from China. And it was ineffective. It's not effective at all because we already had it, and it didn't prevent people who were staying in China from coming in here. So it wasn't effective. But I was like, look, when Trump proposed that, we had no reason to believe he wasn't being bigoted. Why? Because when he ran for office, he ran on a platform that included a total and complete ban of Muslims entering the country. And he ran on how Mexico is sending murderers and rapists. So he had two xenophobic, bigoted planks to his campaign platform. So why wouldn't we believe that his ban from China, travel from China, would be any different? And every single time I say that, some conservative goes, he didn't say that. He only banned travel from 7 countries, just like Obama. He didn't say that. And then I go and I find the clip of Donald Trump reading from his own website, from his own press release. Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete, whatever, blah, 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 of Muslims entering this country. His words. And then they always find a way to write it off as that's not what he really meant, but he only had to, they never admit that they were wrong. But Donald Trump was bigoted, and why would we believe that any of his other actions would not have bigotry hooked into it if it could be? Daily News question. Anything... The scale of long COVID is enormous and is only getting bigger, according to Nadia Chambers. Probably. And look, I'm in a weird situation in that, like, back a few months ago, like maybe in February or so, maybe a little beforehand, my son tested positive for COVID. And he had to stay home for school. And my youngest one did. But none of us in the house tested positive. We all tested negative. But he was the only one who didn't have symptoms. Me and my wife were both sick as dogs. Now, I didn't feel like I felt when I thought that I had COVID back in January, but felt more like an upper respiratory infection and less of a lower respiratory infection. But I was tested. I was tested twice, and it turned out that I was negative, had a negative COVID test. Now, my doctor seems to think that it's very possible that I still had COVID and just got a false negative. Maybe it's possible that this cough that I have is just a symptom of some sort of long COVID. I don't know. But it's a very long, prolonged cough from whatever it is that I had back in the spring. It's really bothering the crap out of me. Let's see. Daily News. Sweeping sanctions against much of Russian President Vladimir Putin's inner circle, along with top officials and several businesses, including state-owned weapons trading company. Now, let me tell you, Daily News. Now, are you sure these were friends of Putin? Maybe Putin wanted these people out of the way, so Putin could have more power. Yes? Let's see. Daily News, I don't know if you've provided resources, because if you share links to the chat, they're not going to show up because it doesn't work like that. But let's just see. Trump. What did you put? Sanctions against Russian against Putin inner circle. Politico. 4/6/2018. Trump administration on Friday sanctioned 7 oligarchs with close ties to Putin, including Putin's son-in-law and businessman, with links to 2016 presidential campaign, further widening the gap between Trump's rhetoric and actions towards Russia. Included are the sanctions list is Oleg Deripaska, billionaire connected to former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. See, Daily News, you're missing something in your thing. Trump didn't go after Putin's inner circle because he was going after Putin. Trump was going after Putin's inner circle because Putin's inner circle was connected to him, and he wanted to try and make it look like he had nothing to do with it. Because old Oleg over here, Oleg Deripaska, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I'm sure I'm not. Maybe I need to pronounce it in Russian. Oleg Deripaska, a billionaire connected to Paul Manafort. Bye, Aaron. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. Appreciate you, especially. You're awesome. Thank you. Anyway, so Manafort's relationship with Deripaska is under scrutiny from special counsel Robert Mueller. The sanctions are sure to heighten tensions between Russia and U.S., which have escalated even as Trump himself makes diplomatic overtures to Putin. Last month, Trump congratulated Putin on his win in an election widely viewed as a sham and invited Russian leader to the White House. Days later, the administration expelled 60 Russian diplomats in response to a nerve attack agent on whatever. We seek a better relationship with Russia. That can as a senior administration official, it wasn't Trump saying it. But yeah, he didn't go after Putin's inner circle because he was going after Putin and being tough on Putin. He was covering his own ass. That's it. When you said sanctions, Daily News, you said sweeping sanctions against Russians, members of Putin's inner circle, along with top officials in several businesses, including state-owned weapons trading company. That's it. That's the words you said from the article, and you're trying to say that. But no, Trump didn't have sweeping sanctions against Russia to harm Putin. He did it to help himself and try and bury the connection between Manafort and himself. So, see, so far, what about the burner phone? Reported by Rolling Stone, could be over 6 hours of blackout was due to the burner phone gate. Daily News, people were upset when Trump was pushing a vaccine. See, people made the comments about Trump and the vaccine because, like, Kamala Harris said that she wouldn't take the vaccine just because Trump said so, but she would take it if Fauci said so, because Trump was somebody who was trying to tout snake oil. Take hydroxychloroquine. Take what's the horse dewormer, or the one that's based off horse dewormer, and that, you know, there are versions for malaria that people take, but the people were literally going into animal supply stores and taking horse dewormer, whatever, ivermectin. You know, Trump pushes all that snake oil stuff. So why would then I believe that Trump was being legitimate about a vaccine that we should take? So no, I wouldn't listen to Trump when he said, take the vaccine, it's good. I promise you it's good. No, I would listen to experts on pandemics and on virology. And if they said the vaccine was good, I would take it. And that's why I took it. Let's see. What else? Scrolling back through. So Aaron left, as I said bye to Aaron. I didn't say anything about the Muslim. I know you didn't say anything about the Muslim ban, but but I just brought it up. But I'm talking about the Russian stuff. These so-called sanctions where Trump was so hard on Putin. He wasn't hard on Putin. He was covering his ass. Yep, Bill, Jolie, ivermectin. Yeah, I got there. And look, if you have a doctor and you want to listen to that doctor and that doctor wants to prescribe ivermectin, I have no problem with a doctor prescribing you ivermectin. That's in a literal bottle in drugs produced for humans, produced for human consumption. I'm not going to have a problem with that. Now, if you're a doctor and you want to prescribe ivermectin in a hospital, and the hospital's like, no, this is not officially allowed for use for COVID, so you don't get to do it in our hospital, I'm fine with that too, because that's the hospital's right to say that. But I am going to mock people who went to an animal supply store who say, oh, I'm going to go get me this horse dewormer and think I'm going to be okay. Yeah, right. So the sanctions were only won a little bit by the party to help avoid focus on one person connection to Manafort. Ivermectin works. De Souza's mules are worm-free because of it. Good one, Bill. You can tell the people who have things on Trump because he will never mock them. That's a good point. What would Trump say about that? What would he say?
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. Let's see. Hide Shadows, if you even get a channel, you have got a subscriber in me. Is that like from Toy Story? You've got a subscriber in me. You've got a subscriber in me. Oh my. That might be, I don't know. You might take that the wrong way. Anyway. So yeah, so let's roll back to the kind of maybe finish up the conversation that I was trying to have about working together and not working together. Like, I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where leftists and progressives and liberals get along famously and perfectly. I don't think that's ever going to be a truth. I think that there's, the more separation that we see between us, the more things we'll have to pick on each other. The more, a leftist, somebody who's extremely left might, want to see like radical revolutionary type stuff going on. Whereas maybe a progressive like myself would be more pragmatic about where we're going, and a liberal might be even more cautious than that. And those level of caution might take off the leftists. The vitriol that comes from the leftists might aggravate the progressive or the liberal. And I don't know how you make that so it all goes away, because it probably won't. But I think the most important thing to take into consideration and is that, I've kind of described it as like when you agree with somebody 95% of the time and you disagree with them about 5% of the issues, 9 times out of 10, just focus on the things that you agree on and just let the disagreements just be disagreements and be things that, okay, maybe we can circle back to this later, but let's focus on the things that work together and the things that we agree on. Of course, it doesn't work in every case. Of course, there are clear circumstances where individuals will do things that are so horrible that you can't overlook it. And that's fine, and you don't have to overlook every single thing to the sake of getting along together. But at the end of the day, and I think that's why, like me and Brian and Nimbus Yosh, the host of most of the Percy podcast, I think that's one of the reasons why we get along together. It's like, even though we disagree on some things, we work together and agree on so much other stuff that we don't argue too much about those disagreements, and instead we talk about the things that we agree on. So I think if we can do that, if we can do, and one of the other things to take into consideration, and the problem with labels in general, which is the title of the podcast, is that labels can many times be good to describe who you are. Maybe liberal perfectly describes you. Maybe progressive perfectly describes you. Maybe leftist perfectly describes you. But there are so many times, so many spaces between the labels that don't, where one doesn't fit perfectly, but one fits close enough that that's what you use, but it doesn't fit perfectly. And so it's also valid to use a label, but not quite yet be exactly that label. So maybe you are like between a progressive and a liberal, or maybe you're between progressiveness and leftist, or maybe you're kind of up here where it's like maybe more gray area of a combination of the three. Maybe you touch different parts of each grouping with separate policies, but maybe one of them you agree with the most, and that's why you call yourself that. But in reality, you're kind of a taste of all three. So I think that's one of the things that we all need to understand, is that labels are not perfect. There are a lot of people who live between the labels and are valid in doing so, and we need to work as hard as we can together to make sure that we can, keep Congress blue. and prevent what's going and try and fight against what's going to happen in June with the Supreme Court ruling, and work to protect the existing rights while working to enshrine those others that people have worked so far for. Let's see. Sanctions or siege warfare on the scale of national territories versus individual cities or fortresses. I'm not sure what the point is there. Most effective way to administer horse dewormer is to put a tube into the horse's nose to its stomach. I own a horse of 20 years. That's how we did it. They're using it wrong. Let's see. Sure, Merlin, my name says it all. Hide in the shadows. I keep my identity somewhat hidden, but thanks anyways. Trump supporters were upset with Trump. I mean, Trump supporters, there are... I've listened to, like, there's one of the guys who's been banned from Twitter. I think his name is Joshua Bernstein. I've played one of his clips on the show. Oh, we got a caller. Hold on. I played one of his clips on the show. But yeah, I've heard conservatives who are like, I support Trump a lot. I don't like that he pushed vaccines. A lot of people support like Donald Trump, but don't like that he's endorsing Dr. Oz. There's apparently another person in that race who they like better. And this I think Jeff, the guy I know locally, had one of the people on the shows or had somebody on the show talking about one of those people, where I think her mom was 11 when she got raped, and the person who's running for the Senate is a product of that. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to begrudge somebody for delivering whatever, that's fine. I think it's morally abhorrent to force an 11-year-old to gestate. The harm that can be done to somebody who's 11 years old far exceeds anything else. So while my personal beliefs are that abortion should be available with no exception 100% of the time, because those so-called exceptions that they're so worried about only happen in medical necessity cases. But if your law would force an 11-year-old rape victim to gestate to term, yeah, you suck. And I'm not going to agree with you. Let's see, Nadia. I'm not really convinced that Democrats are operating in good faith about Russia or about anything. We'll get back to that. But we do have the call. Caller, what's your name? Where are you from?
My name's Joe.
Hey, Joe. How's it going today?
Yeah. Okay. So, of course, you're going to be discussing Roe versus Wade and probably some other issues.
Yes.
So, Roe versus Wade is a 10% of teapot. Roe versus Wade means that the federal government isn't going to have control over that particular issue, but it's going to throw it back to the states. Now, nothing wrong with doing that. As a matter of fact, the states should have sovereignty over their own particular
okay, let me ask you a question about that. Let me ask you a question about that before we go on. You say states should have sovereignty over those issues.
I can't hear you.
You say states should have sovereignty over those issues? I reject the idea. Now, states get powers from the Constitution via the 10th Amendment. So we'll agree on that, I'm sure. I don't call them states' rights. I call them states' powers, because people have rights and states have powers. But states have authority granted to them by the Constitution to act via the 10th Amendment. Now.
Okay.
But why would a state, if something is a right, if something is an activity, or if some activity is a right, why should the state be considered to have the power to restrict that right? Or should the states have the requirement to prove that they have the authority to restrict an action by an individual? And otherwise, should that action be considered to be a right? Because my problem with the Alito ruling, one of my problems with the Alito ruling, one of my problems with the Alito ruling is simply that Alito said that individuals should be required to explain to the courts why they believe a certain activity should be a right. And to me, if you're conservative, that line of thought should be abhorrent, because to me that's saying government has the authority and people have to prove that they don't. When in reality, what should happen is government should have to always prove that it has the authority to restrict whatever action it's trying to restrict. As I said earlier in the show, when it comes to things like, murder and rape, yeah, that's going to be very easy for government to prove. Government has the authority to protect people from other people, or people and entities from other people and entities. But shouldn't government have to prove that it has the authority to prohibit an action instead of individuals having to prove that they have the authority that they have the right to do an action?
When the government is being sued, whether it's the local government, the state government, or the federal government, then they have to prove their case. They should have to prove their case. Actually, if you're going to sue them, it's a civil matter, and the plaintiffs, they usually have to prove the case. But the government should be able to prove the case. In other words, they should have to. When we've been around for since 1776, or even prior to that, if you take a look at the Articles of Confederation, the authority is given to them.
1776, right? Not before.
No,
that.
The Constitution was 1776.
No, the Constitution was 1789.
Constitution 1783. Now, those were the Bill of Rights, I think. 1776 was the Revolution. It lasted for 7 years, 1783. And then the Constitution came in 1789. The Constitution was ratified. The Bill of Rights came in later. So there's supposedly a social contract. If you're going to be a Spoonerist, person who believes in Lysander Spooner's philosophy of anarchy, since nobody signed that particular Constitution, us, the descendants, we don't have this social contract. But that's another discussion. Let's just assume that the Supreme Court and the other branches of government are working somewhat well.
Okay.
The authority is given them. The authority should be given to them by the people who are willing to be governed. If you're not willing to be governed by that authority, then you're supposed to have sovereign powers, but we all know you don't, because the authority is given to the people who have guns. They're the ones with authority. They're the ones with the power. Rights, is like what George Carlin said. We don't have rights. We have privileges. Unalienable rights, it's a nice expression, but unless you can defend it, you're going to end up in somebody's gulag. So we have privileges. Now, getting back to Roe versus Wade, I'm for abortion, but not for reasons 99% of the people would even think about. But when you were talking about that 11-year-old who was forced to give birth, she unfortunately was probably in a Catholic family. Catholics they're the very strictest of the Christian religions, and they believe no matter what happens to you, you have to take the abortion not abortion, but take the child to term. Right. I think they may have been changing their ideas lately, but that's what.
Right. Well, the Catholic Church won't allow you to target the fetus or the embryo. The Catholic Church, like if somebody has uterine cancer and you have to remove the uterus that has a fetus in it, but you're not targeting the fetus itself, the Catholic Church will be okay with that procedure because you're not specifically targeting the uterus. The fetus, you're only targeting the uterus, and it's just a byproduct. The termination of the pregnancy is a byproduct of the procedure, but the Catholic Church otherwise says you're not allowed to have an abortion for any reason, even if you're like if you were raped, ectopic pregnancy, and even if you're raped, exactly. But there are a lot of the church. That's the feeling of the church. But there are a lot of Catholics who don't politically.
Hey, you're breaking up. What I'm going to do, I'm going to call back in a few seconds.
Okay.
And then you can pick up again. All right.
All right.
Because I can't hear you.
All right.
Okay.
Can anybody in the chat? Is everybody in the chat having problems hearing me, or is everybody in the chat okay? Just want to make sure that I'm coming in fine in the chat. Let's see. Nadia Chambers, about anything they just cave to the right too consistently. All right. Well, yes, I wish the Democratic Party had more of a spine when it comes to certain things. But at the end of the day, the Democratic Party is the only thing you have currently dealing to fight the Republican Party. So if you're not, even if you're not going to join like what Bernie does, Bernie runs as a Democratic socialist, but he caucuses with the Democratic Party. So even if you're not going to join up with him, we need to at least work together as Democrats to deal with the problems that are being caused by the Republican Party. Now, I would argue that if you had more leftists and progressives joining the Democratic Party, you would move the Democratic Party to the left, which would benefit, I think, everybody. Julie Swenson, 11-year-old's body isn't capable of handling a baby. Exactly. Let's see. Daily News, you say let's get rid of labels. I didn't necessarily say let's get rid of labels, but let's just understand that if we have that there is room between the labels, and labels are often imperfect. Daily News thinks Dr. Oz is a quack. Well, okay, there's two of us and probably more than us. Daily News says no law would even be proposed, such as the 11-year-old you spoke about. That's not true. Again, as the caller who just called back in stated, there are people who believe in a policy of no abortions without exception. Bobby Jindal, who ran for governor of Louisiana, supports the idea of no abortions, no exceptions, and using his Catholic faith as a resource to support that stance. And that stance would force an 11-year-old rape victim who was impregnated to gestate to term. And that's morally abhorrent, and that shouldn't be allowed. So you say it wouldn't happen? It's good. It happens. Now, I think the Mississippi case, you may be able to make a case, even though the 11-year-old wasn't, the rape exception isn't in the Mississippi case, you may be able to make the exception for the life and health provisions that are contained in the Mississippi case. But in the Louisiana case, basically, the Louisiana law that they want to push, they're saying that there's no abortions, no exceptions, and you're even punishing the person who obtains the abortion with murder. So there's that. Okay, so we're back on with the caller. I hope you can hear me better.
Yeah, you're a little bit better.
All right.
It's my fault. It's my app, so don't worry about it.
That's fine.
The thing is, getting back to the morality of abortion, with Catholics, you are born to suffer. Supposedly, you are released from original sin, but then again, all of a sudden you're born, you've got original sin again, and you were born to suffer. So if you suffer, tough. That's their premise, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So anything that happens to you, okay, you can search out a good life, a great life, as long as you worship God, but if you suffer, well, too bad. So that also applies to people who are going to suffer as a result of unwanted pregnancies via rape. So that's the Catholic foundation for that. But with where you were leading with your question about should the states have authority versus the federal government, well, if the federal government has the authority over the entire 50 states of the union, that means somebody like Biden or anybody else that people don't like as a president and the other people who occupy the other branches of government, they dictate to everybody what is good or bad. However, if you take away that power from the federal government and give it to the states, maybe you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 states that are bad, but you have other states which are good. So you at least have some sort of choice there.
Well, to me, when you add the 14th Amendment into the mix, I would say, yeah, states have the authority to do certain things, and we might have good states and bad states. But you have the federal government there as not necessarily to run everything, but as a check to basically say, okay, if a state, if bad state X decides that they're going to deny equal protection of the law to the citizens of that state, then the federal government gets to come in and stop that. The Constitution grants them the authority to stop states from denying people equal protection under the law. So that's why the 14th Amendment exists. That's why I believe that
Supreme Court. If the law is constitutional, and that's why we have the Supreme Court to determine whether or not the laws under any kind of locality, municipality, or federal government are they constitutional. So if we don't have the Supreme Court, then the states, cities, etc., they can run their particular territories anywhere they wanted to. And we can't have that either. Theoretically, we're supposed to have checks and balances between the 3 branches of government. We don't, but that's what the theory is.
That is the theory, yes. Okay. All right, so do you have any other points to make, or because I don't want dead air?
Oh, no, if you want any feedback on that, but I can talk about politics. And, well, let me ask you this. What do you think is the most pressing problem facing America today?
Honestly, I think everybody likes to say the economy. I mean, everybody will answer that question, the economy, because whatever hits your pocketbook is what you see most frequently. But honestly, I think it's hard to answer that question simply because of the fact that there's a lot that's wrong, and B, there's a lot that's important that you don't want. You answer the question, you say what maybe your pet thing is this time of day or this time of the year or at this particular time, but there are plenty of things. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So I think right now as this country we're facing issues with just issues dealing with what is the role of government in human interactions. Overall, does government have the authority what government authority exists to prevent human actions? What should government be stepping in and stopping? What should government be stepping in and protecting? Why a lot of times that people will talk about things like big government and oppose, like if the federal government, like you said if the federal government bans something or allows something, it's nationwide. But if you leave it to the states, you say you might have good states, you might have bad states. And if you have bad states, some people aren't necessarily mobile enough to be able to leave those bad states and get to the good states. But regardless of the equal protection argument, one of the things that I've found is that, a bigger government at the federal level might be more powerful than smaller governments. But smaller governments, as you get more and more local, that's the more direct impact that you could have on an individual. Like go all the way down to the tiniest government, like your little homeowners associations that people have, and people will abuse power in those things greatly. Go to your little fiefdoms, your little in Louisiana we don't have counties, we have parishes. In Orleans Parish it's one municipality, it's one city. In Jefferson Parish you have the Jefferson Parish government that covers the entire parish. But you also have little cities like Gretna and Westwego and Kenner, where all these little fiefdoms pop up, where all these little people have their own little control over their own little area. And, these, to me, maybe those areas were needed at the time because of how far apart certain cities were from each other, so they could be able to handle the things within their borders. But you often find, these people or these government entities just finding excuses to act and finding excuses to restrict individual behavior, or acting in ways that harm people in their areas. Like, for example, Gretna, Louisiana, is very well known for mistreating the black folks who happen to be driving through it. Getting a DWB, a driving while black, in Gretna is not a good idea. I could talk if I did have on my friend Don Nimbus-Yost, the host of the Most with Percy podcast. He could tell you about the 3 times he's been pulled over in Gretna just for driving around Gretna, not doing anything. So again, it's a very, what government has control over, is a big issue. The role of government is a big issue, and the economy is a big issue. I don't know. I think just, I don't know. It's hard to answer that question. I think because there's
all of that you mentioned, everything that you mentioned is under the subcategory, which I consider to be the biggest problem. That's corruption.
Uh-huh.
Because if you have scumbags in Congress, scumbags as mayors, scumbags as governors, then it doesn't matter how good the supposed laws are, because they can corrupt them. They can change them, like they did prior to the election in 2020, when the federal election boards of the swing states changed their laws unconstitutionally in order to allow for mail-in ballots and absentee ballots. So the little fiefdoms you're talking about, they do have more of an impact on the local citizens. But we can't forget that the fiefdoms have, to a large degree, are under the authority of the mayor. The mayor's to a great degree, under the authority of the governor. And the states, which, of course, like the cities, they always spend more than they take in taxes. They always look to the federal government for a bailout. And when the federal government gives them the money in order to bail out their stupidity, there's always strings attached. And when there are strings attached to that degree, it means the federal government runs the state and runs the mayor and runs the cities. So that's just the way it is. That's the way politics is run. You want my money? Then you got to scratch my back. If you don't scratch my back to the degree I want you to, the money gets withdrawn. So, in essence, most states are under the power of the federal government. And I happen not to like it. I'm not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. The label that anybody can put on me, which I gladly accept, will be that of a libertarian.
Okay.
So, I don't like the government in our business at all, except to protect our borders and to protect us from the enemies within and without. Everything else should be done by the states, by the cities, because then the people have more power to overrule the corruption that's there, as opposed to having that corruption coming down from the head, which is Capitol Hill and the presidency. So those are my viewpoints.
All right. Well, I mean, I would argue that in many states, though, you do have the situation where the corrupt folks in power do what is referred to as choosing their voters when they gerrymander districts, when they draw lines. And again, both sides do it, but it's been my experience that there's one side that's much worse than the other currently at this time. And so if you're able to, so you end up having it be much more difficult for the citizens of that state, for example, to act and overturn the actions of a corrupt government if the government is drawing the lines and choosing the voters and packing people into certain districts and or splitting people out of certain districts to make sure that they can maintain a majority rule despite not having a majority of the people voting for them in the election. Like, for example, Wisconsin, when Wisconsin voted for their governor the last time, you had a Democratic governor won, and more people voted for Democratic legislators than Republican legislators in the Wisconsin House. But if I'm remembering it correctly, but it should be, because I mean it should line up with how the governor's race ended up. But you still ended up having a large majority of Republicans controlling the Wisconsin House because of the way that the Wisconsin Republicans drew the lines and made sure that they could retain power. That's why I have.
I'm sorry, but I had such a bad connection. You're breaking up again. Again, that's not your fault. It's probably my fault.
Sure.
New phone, and I'm using an old app. I can't hear you, so I'm sorry. I'd like to hear your reply.
Well, maybe if you listen to the replay, or maybe if you watch on YouTube, you might be able to catch the end of it. But
okay.
Look up stopthecoup.liberaldan.com is one of the things one of the projects that I've been working on about gerrymandering.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I have another phone line I'm going to use, and I'm going to call back in a few seconds.
Well,
and hopefully that line will work. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to hang up on that.
I'm probably ending the show soon. I was about to end the show before I saw your call. I was about to end the show before I saw your call, so I'm probably ending the show soon anyway. But maybe try back next week, because we're probably going to be ending soon anyway, because I have some other stuff to do before I go to bed. So, but I thank you for calling.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Tune in next week, every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central, here on Blog Talk Radio, or you can watch on YouTube as well. And subscribe on the YouTube channel as well. But I appreciate you calling in. I do, again, one of the things that I like to say, and I'm going to put you on mute for a second. One of the things I like to say, and I've been talking to the people who been criticizing me on TikTok, for example, is simply that, when people call in from the other side of the aisle or with differing opinions from myself, I'm not going to berate them or criticize them out of hand. I'm going to have a nice, calm, rational discussion with them. And we may disagree. I disagree with the last caller on the idea about the 2020 actions being stolen or being unconstitutional. We were in the middle of a pandemic. I think there are reasonable actions that government should be able to take to protect its citizens during a pandemic to make sure that them exercising their rights to vote do not interfere with their ability to have their votes heard and their votes cast. So Jolie got to go, have a dentist appointment. I have a dentist appointment on Friday, unfortunately, so I feel your pain. Thank you, Bill, very much. Let's see, Bill P., city manager of my hometown, came to my house to deny my permit to put in a wheelchair access to my property. He said that local law superseded state and federal law. Bill Clinton informed him of ADA. Wow. That's, again, no, as I said, local governments too many times, like when conservatives talk about, or he wasn't a conservative, but he's libertarian. Some people would wonder what the difference is. I understand that there's some. Libertarians tend to be more hands-off when it comes to like government restricting their individual activities. But yeah, what I was saying to the caller, you have a situation where a lot of people who are conservatives or libertarian-minded folks think that a strong federal government is bad because power should be locally dealt with. But when power is locally dealt with and that power is bad, you need to check on that power. The state needs to be able to come in and stop the city from doing that. And if the state refuses to come in and stop the state from doing the bad thing, the federal government should have the ability to come in and stop the state stop the municipality from doing the bad thing. So, I really don't want to get into the whole Bernie thing today. I really do want to. I really don't want to get into why Bernie lost. It's too much. Too much to go into at the end of the day. So, but let's see. They argue fetal personhood from the moment of conception fertilization. They'll say it's sad she's going through it, but it doesn't justify killing the baby. I don't know what group. Oh, you're talking about the people that would ban abortion. But yeah, obviously, they'll talk about fetal personhood at the moment of conception fertilization, but they won't do things like, if you had a freezer on a cart that you could push, and then you had an infant in like a NICU cart that you could push, and let's say each of them had their own generators, but you could only push one, and you had a burning building, and you had the decision, save a freezer full of 100 embryos or save the baby in the NICU cart. You could only save one, you could only push one out of the building. Which one do you push out of your building? Guarantee you're picking the infant, you're not picking the freezer full of 100 embryos, which says that the infant has much more value than those frozen embryos right there. But of course, that's just one example of why conservative arguments often don't allow themselves to be, realistically applied, because they're not consistent in any way, shape, or form. Anyway, so we could talk about the primary Nadia says something about the primary machinations versus Bernie were bad. Maybe we can get into a little bit more about that in the next show. I don't know. We'll see. But I do want to go ahead. I do have some other stuff to take care of tonight. So I do want to, end this show. I want to thank everybody for joining in. Thank you, everyone, for if you haven't subscribed to me yet on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe. YouTube.com/LiberalDanRadio. If you haven't liked the video, make sure to give it a like as well. Watch some videos on the channel, share them with your friends if you like them. Trying to build this up to be a very good, successful thing, and I can only do it with your help. So, again, next week, 8 p.m. Central, blogtalkradio.com/LiberalDan, Liberal Dan Radio on Twitter, on TikTok, Facebook.com/LiberalDan, and LiberalDan.com. Until next week, this is Dan Zimmerman with Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right.